Call this meeting to order. Amy, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ann, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Reiner.
Here.
Mayor Lechleiter.
Here.
Mr. Gerber.
Here.
Mrs. Boring. Vice Mayor Saleh.
Here.
Ms. Genesee Zerker.
Here.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Beginning this evening with some special presentations and proclamations. First, Jack and Ann Partridge are here to speak to us regarding the Central Ohio United Way campaign. And if you want to come to the podium right here. Sure.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Ann and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you in our role as co-chairs of this year's United Way of Central Ohio campaign. But first, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank you and your team for your leadership in making our community a wonderful place to live and raise a family. And obviously, I include past city councils. Mr. Reiner is all of the above. But we were transferred to Columbus and bought a home in Dublin in 1989. Our 4 daughters were ages 1, 1, 1, and 2.5. They are now ages 25, 25, 25, and 26.5. Having the good fortune to raise them in Dublin has a lot to do with them being happy, healthy, productive young women. We love having family and friends visit us and hearing them rave about the quality of life here in Dublin. So we thank you for that. But that leads me to comment briefly on those less fortunate than we are. In preparing for and assuming our United Way campaign chairmanship, Ann and I were absolutely shocked to learn of the high levels of poverty in Central Ohio and the fact that poverty is growing. I would like to briefly share with you a few select facts. Central Ohio, Columbus is ranked 14th out of 16 corresponding municipalities in terms of having the highest poverty levels. We have higher poverty levels in Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Cleveland, and there's something wrong with that picture. 1 in 5 families with children live in poverty in Central Ohio. 75% of Columbus school children qualify for free or reduced price lunch assistance. That's almost 38,000 students. But poverty is growing, as I said, and it's more pervasive than ever before, and that takes me to the suburbs and Dublin. We were most surprised to learn that 15% of Dublin school kids qualify for lunch assistance, and that's up from 4.4% in 2002. Dublin has one of the largest food pantries in the system. Requests were up 15%, 2012 versus 2011, and over 70% of requests for food pantry help comes from households with children. I think we all agree child hunger is a health problem, child hunger is an education problem, and child hunger will be a workplace problem. United Way's mission is to fight poverty, and we believe it has a comprehensive approach focusing on 4 pathways out of poverty: home, health, education, and income. This year's goal is daunting. Our goal this year is to raise $51.8 million. So we ask you to consider becoming more involved. How? Help us continue the conversation. I've found in my travels and my meetings, my CEO visits, people are not aware of the levels of poverty in our community and the impact. Get involved by volunteering, and we need to help people, encourage people to give so we can continue to improve lives and strengthen the community. I was just told today, and I was so pleased, and I thank Sandra, that you actually, City of Dublin is kicking off the United Way campaign this week or next week. We would love to help encourage momentum and make people aware of the challenge we have before us. So I appreciate that. I need to tell you, this experience has changed our lives. I live in a beautiful home. I'm privileged to live in a beautiful home on the Muirfield Village Golf Course. Prior to this undertaking, a year ago, I'd sit on my deck and think about golf. More often than not, I sit on my deck and I think that within a couple of miles of my house, there are people living in poverty. And it really concerns me, and especially the children. Ann?
Yes, good evening, and thank you again for having us. When Jack and I were asked last year to co-chair this campaign for Central Ohio, neither of us really realized what United Way did and what its historical purpose was and what it's doing presently, even though we'd supported it for years. But after several meetings, a lot of reading materials and tours, its purpose became pretty clear to us, and that's when we seriously committed to help spread the word, raise awareness, and work endlessly to raise money for a hand up to individuals and families living in fear, hopelessness, and anxiety because of poverty. The hand up is offered through over 160 programs conducted by approximately 80 participating agencies that United Way evaluates, monitors, and makes sure they have integrity and are truly helping to make a positive difference in people's lives, especially those living in poverty and their children who are the real victims of poverty. As a result of visiting a dozen or more partnering agencies and attending lunch and learns with employees at Columbia Gas this past September and October, and even now into November, we have experienced firsthand the impact that many of these programs have on individuals. And we saw, as a result of these experiences, toddlers, children, and young teenage mothers being offered care, after-school programs, and counseling at places like Central Community House, preschoolers being better prepared for kindergarten so that their chances of not dropping out during their high school years increases. At the Glavine Community Center, St. Vincent's Family Center, and through the Columbus Kids program. We saw teens in crisis and runaways who are being given a safe place to live with counseling for them and their family members, and a chance for making it on their own as young adults through a transitional living program at the Huckleberry House. We saw battered and homeless women being provided temporary shelter at Rebecca's Place, and through the YWCA and the Community Shelter Board with counselors and navigators helping them to build better lives in permanent, stable homes. We've seen men and talked with men from jail who want to make a better life for themselves and be better fathers by getting help from counselors and job training at the Urban League. We've seen women and talked to women of all ages, including grandmothers who want job training now so that they can pay their bills and take care of their grandchildren and pay for their prescription medicines that they can no longer afford. This help they're getting at the New Directions Career Center. We've met and talked with sweet people with developmental disabilities who are being trained for jobs and how to use the computer to communicate and are being given individualized support at Goodwill so they can work to live with dignity and independence and/or interdependence. We've met people who gain much needed refunds through the United Way Tax Assistance Program, and a growing number of families and individuals right here in Dublin who are finding it hard to put food on the table after paying their basic bills like rent, gas for their cars, and utilities. And these people are counting more and more on our food banks to feed their families and their children. Poverty is like a cancer. It will continue to grow with no limitations because of community borders. To decrease it and to keep it from becoming an epidemic, it must be attacked by a united force, and that is many organizations, public and private, communities, and individuals making a long-term and serious commitment to support and create programs that are effective, that will build better, stronger communities, even if it's one family at a time. United Way knows how important this is, and it needs Dublin's help with raising awareness and securing donations and volunteers. Jack and I and the United Way staff and all that are committed to fighting poverty and building sustainable programs to make strong communities a reality by building pathways out of poverty are most grateful for your help. Thank you all, and thank you for your time tonight.
Any questions?
Anybody? I'd just like to say hats off to you for your leadership of this campaign. I'm sure you can count on Dublin as being supportive. both the city and its citizens, I suspect, will be very supportive. You know, you can count on us, keep in touch with us. Marcia, do you have anything to add with respect to what the administration is doing?
Yeah, and as was mentioned earlier, we are kicking off our campaign sometime within the next week or so, and we'll have information out to employees and encourage employees to participate to the best of their abilities and recognize the importance of all the good that the United Way does for the larger community.
Thank you, Marcia. And I might add that, you know, United Way is more than happy to come and to speak at any organizations, whether it's in the schools or civic organizations, if you need it. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks for the information. Much appreciated.
Thanks. Okay, well, we have a couple of proclamations. Nick Sparling, you want to join me over here, please? How are you? Is this your coach, or? It is. Come on over here. We're gonna. I'm sorry? Yes. You want to come on up?
I'm trying to get off the hook from having to
All right.
stand up here. Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it.
We'll face this direction here. I have a proclamation to read to you, Nick, and it reads as follows. Whereas for the second consecutive year, Nick Sparling, Dublin Kaufman High School senior, captured the Division I State Golf Championship title on Saturday, October 19th, 2013, at the OSU Scarlet Course. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that. That's for the second consecutive year. Is that correct? That's pretty impressive. Very impressive. Whereas Nick carded a 70 in the first round and a 76 in the second for a 146 total, finishing 4 strokes ahead of runner-up. I don't know why we have the runner-up name in here, but anyway, Jack Manzanati of Toledo St. John. Anyway, congratulations to Jack. Whereas Sparling also was Ohio Capital Conference Central Player of the Year for the second consecutive year, averaging a 69 over the 4 rounds of the league tournament, as Dublin Kaufman achieved a record of 28-0 to capture its second league title in 3 years. And whereas Sparling has given a verbal commitment to play college golf at The Ohio State University in 2014 and dreams of one day playing on the PGA Tour. And whereas the Dublin Kaufman team is ably coached by David Woodmansey, thank you, who played an important role in the success of both the team and the individual players. And whereas Nick's hard work and support from his coach, teammates, and family were key in his achievements at the state championship level. Now, therefore, I, Timothy A. Lecklider, Mayor of the City of Dublin, Ohio, on behalf of Dublin City Council, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 23rd, 2013, as Nick Sparling State Golf Champion Day in the City of Dublin, and extend our congratulations to Nick on this outstanding achievement. Anything you'd like to say, Nick?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the Dublin City Council and the City of Dublin and my coach and my parents and my teammates for all the support this year. I couldn't have done it without them.
How about your coach?
Yeah, I'll say a few words. One thing I want to say is thank you so much for honoring our student athletes here. We really appreciate it. This is a moment that they'll always remember, being here in front of a packed house, being honored by the City of Dublin. Having something like this is very meaningful to them. I'd also like to say, being a Dublin graduate myself, I moved here in 1979 with my parents. I've been in the community for a long time. There's a reason I came back to teach at Dublin Kaufman High School. I can't ask for a better place to live, to work. I moved my family here just so they could have the same experience as I had, and that's a testament to all the hard work that you do every single day and that the people before you have done. One other thing, there's a number of, I'm really proud and honored. I've had a lot of great students over the years. There's a number of students of current members of the board who I also had in class. So give them a hello for me, please. And there was also a former Dublin Kaufman golfer whose father is also on the city council. So I think that's really special. And one other thing I'd like to say about Nick, as great as he did on the golf course, and he had a phenomenal year, 2 state championships. That's hallowed ground. Jack Nicklaus won 2 state championships as an individual, so that gives you the type of career this young man's had. But one of the things I'm most proud of is he was named Academic All-Ohioan as well, which I think that puts the student before the athlete, and that's the way it should be. So I'm really proud of him, and we're so thankful for you having us here today. So thank you very much.
Yay.
Well, congratulations, Nick. Good luck in your college career, and hopefully we'll watch you on the tour someday. Well, now I'm going to ask my colleague Kathy Boring to join me. Let's face the camera. Did you? I don't know if you knew about this. It doesn't matter. Okay. No, maybe you didn't know about this. We have a proclamation, so this is a surprise to Kathy, and it reads as follows. Whereas Women in Municipal Government is an organization that strives ways to raise awareness about issues of concern to women and encourages women to seek public office in their communities. And whereas the Women in Municipal Government Constituency Group was formed in 1974 to serve as a forum for communication and networking among women, local elected officials, and their colleagues within the National League of Cities. And whereas the Women in Municipal Government Leadership Award recognizes female municipal officials for unique and outstanding leadership in local government. And whereas the nominees for the Leadership Award have initiated creative and successful programs in municipal government that help citizens and serve as a mentoring model for future female leaders. And whereas the Women in Municipal Government Leadership Award promotes the increased representation of women in local government and is designed to encourage more women to run for elected municipal office. And whereas Dublin City Council member Kathy A. Boring has demonstrated excellence in leadership and worked to help other individuals strive to achieve similar goals. She has been actively involved with the National League of Cities throughout her service on council. And whereas Kathy A. Boring has been a champion of many initiatives, including Emerald Fields Park, the Art in Public Places program, the Dublin Community Recreation Center, the planning and construction of Emerald Parkway, and the vision for the Bridge Street District, to name but a few. And whereas throughout her career, Kathy A. Boring played a significant role in helping shape the city of Dublin into the exemplary community it is today. And whereas Kathy A. Boring will retire from Dublin City Council in 2013, having been elected to 5 consecutive 4-year terms on City Council, making her the longest-serving member of council in our city's history. Now, therefore, I, Timothy A. Lechleiter, Mayor of the City of Dublin, Ohio, on behalf of Dublin City Council, do hereby congratulate Councilmember Kathy A. Boring for being named a finalist for the 2013 Women in Municipal Government Leadership Award and thank her for her outstanding service and commitment to the City of Dublin. Congratulations.
Can I?
You're not saying
No, please, go ahead.
So we'll have a great celebration on Thursday night. We hope a lot of people will be able to come. But for those who aren't able to come, we really wanted to give Kathy recognition here at her last City Council meeting after 20 years. And on behalf of City Council, I'd like to give you this red roses, as we didn't coordinate this with Mike, but it worked out perfect, see? But just on behalf of myself, and I know many members of council and those that came before us, that Kathy has really, besides being an incredible advocate for her ward and for Dublin, she has also been a great coach and mentor to all of us that have come on City Council. And we don't all agree, and I and Kathy don't agree on a lot of things in terms of how we get to some decision. But that doesn't mean that we haven't learned to respect each other's differences and to really work as a team. And on behalf of myself and City Council, we'd like to thank you for your 20 years of incredible service to this community.
I always think after 20 years I ought to be able to be accountable for something, but As far as helping other council members, I'll tell you one thing is Marcia says that's persistence. And I don't think there's a staff member in the audience that would not say that I haven't been a pain in their neck at one time or another, but they say persistent. So I want to thank you all for this. And if you notice in the back of the room, who came up and gave me roses is my husband. And sometimes I'm negligent about honoring him, but he's put up with this. And my going to NLC out of town and going to evening meetings and being a great father that took care of the child when I was gone. So without his support, I couldn't have been so persistent and pain in the neck for everyone. So thank you very much, Mike.
Going to move on to that portion of our agenda where folks can speak to items not otherwise on this evening's agenda. We're going to begin this evening with Mr. Wally Maurer. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Maurer.
You know, when the two people from United Way were speaking here about poverty, it occurred to me, you know, this city has a number of times won what is called the SMART Award in the country, and it has won the Intelligent Award in the country. And I think we need to recognize in part that those are marketeering attributes. But it occurred to me while they were speaking that this city could become model for the country if it were to set up a commission, which would be a successful one, that would abolish poverty in this city. That would become a global recognition in the city. Not that that's what one should go for, but it has the capacity. It's a very wealthy city. It could abolish poverty in this city. Now, second, I think I'm going to make you exquisitely happy tonight. You prepared? This will be the last time I'm going to bring up that my moody mind is bringing up a very dark and moody subject, and that is the invitation to the city of that university bunch of coaches who come here with their whoop-de-doo show. By supporting them, as you've supported them with, what was it, $50,000, by supporting them, you are promoting the reduction in the lifespan of boys and men. Corporate football has, of course, begun to adjust to this. There's so many plays that involve head first that they've been pretty well eliminated. And the game has now awakened an old play, which is known as the posse play. And the posse is get the quarterback. Because the quarterback success since the unfolding of the scandal in football by the Frontline show of some weeks ago. So now it is it's adapting, and the heroes are becoming the quarterback, and the posse is beginning to work. One of the best quarterbacks in the league, Aaron Rodgers, was smashed the other day, and Green Bay is going down. Okay, you're all looking at your notes. You know you're listening to me. So I'm making one more objection to, you paid $50,000, and I guess they're coming next summer. I protest any penny that has come out of my money. And of course, you pointed out that the money has come from the bed tax from one side, and from the other half, the other 25,000 has come from the bed and the Bureau of Convention, which is run by the great marketeer Scott String. So you've got the money for it, and but I am still in a state of protest and concern because it is fostering shortening of lives. Now, I will expect great happy applause when I tell you it's the last time I'm bringing this up. And you can break into that applause anytime you wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. Pat Grable.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I sent some correspondence to the council, and I must have misunderstood.
Would you please begin by giving us your name and
Yeah,
address?
sure.
Please?
Patrick Grable, 2970 Arbuckle Road, London.
Thank you.
I had sent 2 pieces of correspondence to council, and I had talked to some council members. I had misunderstood that the correspondence would go in the public record, and evidently it hasn't. I sent one letter on the 24th of June and one on the 6th of November. I've talked to many of you about the issues. I'm not really here to complain about the Bridge Street corridor in general. I'm very much in favor of what you're doing, and I'm encouraged by the work and the effort that's put into it. But I have concerns that I want to make sure get in the public record because it's moving very rapidly. I went to the presentation at OCLC, and there wasn't enough time for public input, in my opinion. And I know that there's been a number of public meetings. I really thought that it would be better understood that the difficulties come in from the general statements in the corridor development plan and the consultants you brought in. I think it's very difficult to find reasons to be critical of it if you want to see the redevelopment in a walkable, urban-oriented community, which I frankly worked for in the historic district for about 30 years. So I'm glad to see the direction that it's taking and the interest that it's generated. I'm concerned about some of the specifics that I've expressed in those 2 letters, and I don't want to take the whole evening to go through those. I'll answer any questions any of you might have as it relates to that. But if it's in the public record, then I would assume other people could access that. How do I make that happen? Do I have to communicate to the media, or if it's in the public minutes? Can my correspondence? I thought correspondence got posted if you send it to the city council.
The correspondence that we receive, it does not get posted, but it is a public record and available upon request. And
Okay.
the information has been received both in my office, and city council members have received copies of your letters.
Okay. Because those really outline the issues that I have. If I could reiterate the biggest concern I've got, and you're moving very fast, if I understand it correctly, you're introducing bond sales tonight that affect part of the Riverside Drive development. I'm concerned that in scale and scope, as you develop along the river, you haven't reserved enough land for what I would call taxpayer or resident use as it relates to the river. I would like to see the discussion, and this is a much longer discussion than just the corridor development district, and I've talked to some of you about it, but I hope that Dublin is coming of the size that it can be out front in creating a cultural arts or civic center of some sort. And I've seen it in drafts of the corridor development district, but it's never been specified. I think the place to put that is along the river, so that you're not just doing private sector uses and putting the intensity there, but you're expanding that parkland on Riverside Drive. I would argue that you seriously look at moving Riverside Drive further to the east so you can capture more land, and then we can have public parking that would be facilitated for people to use the River District to walk to the functions and features that are going to be there, and to create things like the library, like a civic center, like council chambers for public meetings. And it can take plenty of time to do it, but if you adopt the plan that's moving ahead rapidly now, you will have erased the opportunity to use that land for those public uses. I've seen this movie play out before, where staff is instructed to begin engineering, and then you ask the question, and then you find out that, well, the engineering's underway, so we're not going to move the roadway. I would really like to know if that's a fact, then there's no sense discussing this. If it's still possible in your structures to have that discussion about enlarging that parkland, I don't really believe the residents and of Dublin understand the impact that you're going to have on that density coming into Riverside Drive from the north down. And there's really, other than commercial uses, there's very little for them to do. I heard the plan submitted that talked about 10 to 20,000 people could occupy that park being bigger than the regional average. Well, a good piece of that park is in floodplain. A good piece of that park is in cliffside. It is an important thing to save it, but when has Dublin ever worked on the average? You know, one of the things that I thought Dublin did very well was they were way in front of all the other communities and most of the citizenry when they built the rec center. That was a very early, bold move. I think it's time for Dublin to kind of think boldly about what they could do for public space and public uses like a civic center, like a cultural arts center, in that location, because I think there ought to be more to go to than just walking across the bridge to cross a busy Riverside Drive to go to more commercial uses. I'm in favor of the uses. I just think the city needs to retain a larger share of that valley as it relates to the river, and I just wanted to make sure that got on the record. And I'm curious, is it cast in concrete right now when you're selling the bonds for Riverside Drive and that plan? Is it done?
Well, for clarification, the bonds that are being sold this evening are for the only portion that relates to the Bridge Street
Right.
or any of the Bridge Street projects are the $5.7 million that
Right.
relate to land that we've already acquired for the intersection improvements at Riverside Drive and State Route 161.
Right.
So the relocation of Riverside Drive, we acquired that property last year about this time, and that is not included in the bonds that are being sold or being authorized this evening.
Well, my concern for coming tonight was when I talk to people, I don't know how far along that is. When I talk to staff, I'm told that they can't perceive that we'd move it because they take instructions from council. Council hasn't instructed them to halt or change. So that engineering expense is going full bore ahead, just as I saw in the presentation at OCLC. And I'm just curious if that discussion is over and if the people north and south of that community really understand it.
Well, part of the information as far as the preliminary design, we initiated that in May of this past year. And are currently finishing up the preliminary engineering. And the reason that was done is to look at the issue of the topography of the land, what would work, what wouldn't work, and making sure that if you go too far to the east, you have impacts related to the roadway and then access down into the park. So that's part of what we've been looking at and was included in an update to City Council in September
Right.
of this past year. And based upon information that we have now, the alignment of the road is what has been presented in those hearings, based upon the preliminary alignment that is finalized. Or that
Okay,
is
it goes
being
back to my
completed.
question. I take issue with the decision to place the road there. I fully well understand that if you move that road further to the east, it's more expensive. But my point is, if the city of Dublin gives up that opportunity, it gives it up forever. And I just don't think that's good enough, and I don't think it's a fair enough economic trade-off for the taxpayers. And I'd like it to be considered. And I still am not sure if that means the preliminary engineering is done. Does that mean nothing can be altered?
Well, it doesn't mean that nothing can ever be altered, but based upon the preliminary engineering that has been completed, the recommendation from an engineering standpoint and what will work in that area and then the land that's left for development, both from the park standpoint and the access to the park, and then also for the commercial development that we recommend the alignment as has been presented.
I understand, but that's, the engineering estimates are based on the preliminary assumptions they're given.
That's correct.
And the assumptions that I'm asking you to reconsider are what happens if you put a parking facility that's owned by the city on that grade as you move that road to the east, and on top of that parking facility, you do a multi-phased cultural arts center, library, other features that the residents of Dublin who live here now can make themselves available to use, and not just the development that's going to happen there. I'm very much in favor of the development. I'm not speaking against any individual developer or development. I just think the city ought to capture its opportunity to enlarge that park, and it will cost more to move that road. But I think it's a specious argument to say that the engineering's done, so we can't move the road. And I've been told that, and that's why I'm here.
Well, the preliminary engineering was completed so that we could have a better understanding of
Right.
where the road should go.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with making sure that you don't put a road in a place that makes it difficult to access the park. So that's one of the elements that we were also looking at, making sure that it's easy transitions into the park from the pedestrian bridge as well as from the development that's on the east.
But the only access I saw from the drawings that I've seen, and I stand to be corrected, are pedestrian accesses, that there wasn't any thought given to vehicular parking and access by people who aren't walking to that area but that want to access the area and get into it, other than private sector parking garages that will service the site. But I'm speaking for public facilities so that you can drive down there, walk across the pedestrian bridge, utilize at a different scale the downtown district and the new developments that are going to happen. That's why I'm asking you to reconsider the preliminary engineering assumptions that were already made.
Thank you, Mr. Grable. Anybody have any questions or comments, Mr. Grable?
I'm personally kind of interested and intrigued by what Mr. Grable has said and suggested in terms of a public use on the east side. We've talked about it sort of in concept for a number of months, years. It's been a long time we've been talking about that, about this whole thing. I'm wondering what we need to do to, explore the idea. And I don't know about the engineering. I know that there are a lot of factors that have gone into it, and we've kind of proceeded. But I'm wondering if there is a possibility for a public use on the east side of the river. And like I said, I don't know about the roadway and the parkland and the size of the park and all that. But I'm interested in discussing the idea.
I support you in that thought that it would be something, as I'm hearing Mr. Grable talk, it seems that it's us that needs to make the direction. Marcia isn't in that position, and when he asks the question, it would be us that makes that decision to look at another possibility. And I would be in favor of that consideration also.
I think we need to explore the idea, if nothing else.
We've had in our goal settings, and I think, Amy, you are one of the leaders in this, have brought up almost in every one of them when we've had the discussion about the movement of the road in the park and all, about looking at and knowing that the library was going to also be moved, looking at what the type of facility that could really be all-inclusive, so that you would have a more interesting and unique kind of facility that would incorporate the library, an educational kind of center, the cultural arts, in perhaps community meeting space. I didn't think that conversation was closed at this point. Is it not still open about that type of a facility and where the location might be?
Well, I think the issue of that type of facility being located somewhere within that area is still open. The issue of whether it's on the land between the river and the relocated Riverside Drive, I think, is questionable based upon the current alignment or realignment of Riverside Drive. It's just difficult because of, again, the topography, the access to the river, the amount of space that would be needed, the transition from the roadways to this facility, but it doesn't preclude it from being somewhere in that area. And we're currently, or we continue to have discussions with the library. They're looking to reinstitute some of their interviewing of firms for architectural services that relate to the library. So it doesn't preclude it from being in the area, but based upon the current land that we have along the river and the idea that the land along the river was the passive park type with some potential for if we wanted to have, whether it's a pavilion or something like that, for those type of amenities.
My understanding, and I need to be corrected if I misunderstood this from an engineering standpoint, and maybe the terminology is not being used properly, but I was under the impression that the location of where the road has ended up was due to, a lot to do with the topography and the stone and everything else that is in the vicinity, in addition to the access that you were talking about. Mr. Grable, of course, is suggesting, and I don't know how much you actually know about the land itself and the ability of it to incorporate the road being further east. So how was that ultimate? Are we correct in assuming that it had to do with all of the way the land is actually set?
Yes, it has a lot to do with the topography of the land, making sure we have access into the parkland and that you have it in such a way that it's easy access, the transition. If you have too steep of a grade into the park, it makes it difficult for people to get into the park. The further we go to the east, the less development potential there is, and that's one of the things we talked about, is having the level of density that we need to generate the type of activity in that area. So based upon our preliminary alignment studies and review that we had, our recommendation is that the Riverside Drive relocation is based upon the placement that we've talked about as early as this past summer, and then more recently in the September workshop with City Council.
You know, Pat, you aren't the first person who suggested this, and one of the architects on planning and zoning, wanted to move the road up the hill.
I don't think I've ever had an original idea in my whole life. So.
No, but I mean, his was somewhat different, but he wanted to move the road back. And I think at that time, I and a number of the city council people here looked into that, and then it became a topographic problem, and being a developer, what that really meant. And there was a lot of interest in that. At the time, is that a possibility? Can we do that? Can we explore this? And then it turned out, no, because the slopes, the grades, percentage of slopes, it wasn't a really economic issue so much as just ended up being an engineering problem. So,
John, I've done a few projects. I can tell you, if you walked into the engineers and told them you want to change this from 100% passive park to an active participation, you can get that road moved. It depends on the cost and the grading, but I will not accept a statement that it can't be done. I know it can be done. It depends on your will and your desire to do that. But I think if you're going to, over the next 150 years, do a civic center, it ought to be in downtown Dublin. If you don't put it here, then you wait for the school system to want to change their uses. I think that is a fallacy.
yeah. Well, the rest,
It ought to be on the river where it's walkable.
the rest of it is that, as Marcia said, and Marilee, the library and the rest of it, it really hasn't been decided on.
Absolutely, I understand.
So
I just don't want you to give the land away and make the assumption that can't work, because the economic payback from the private sector to retire the bonds, I understand that, I know the problem, but don't let the economics determine what that park, I mean, that's Dublin's Central Park, that's Dublin's feature of uniqueness for the next 150 years for this town. I come tonight, and I don't want to be here and be argumentative. I would like to be supportive of what you're doing. I think you've missed an opportunity to think really big on this, and missed an opportunity to put something in there that's really more in the scale of what Dublin ought to be. You already own a lot of the corridor along that river. You got the old Jelpy Mansion and everything else. There's physical ways, and I'll be glad to help any way you want me to. There are physical ways to tie that river frontage together. I will not accept that it's not possible to do it because there's rock. There's rock in everything in downtown Dublin. We can move that grade and do that. It takes a desire of the city council to want to change what they're doing. And that's what I came before you tonight to just ask you to think that thing through. It's going to end up being too intensive development. I'm in the development business, and I'm not opposed to what you're doing. But I think you're missing the biggest opportunity of our lifetime. And like I say, I'm not crazy about coming here tonight. But I just hope council sees far enough ahead to start working toward this. If it takes 20 years to build a cultural arts center on the river, so be it. In the life of this town, that's not much time. If it costs more to move that road over, and you can take advantage of that hillside by putting a banked underground parking facility with buildings on it that still makes it walkable and connectable to what you're trying to achieve, then that just makes the town that much better. I just ask you to rethink it. This is unusual for this council not to think big. I've always been shocked at some of the stuff you're doing. I'm now shocked that you're not thinking along these lines. I've been very much in favor of passive parks. As you know, I helped put together the Red Tribune Nature Park. I want to see that river frontage changed as a natural walking area, but there's another opportunity that needs to be looked at in conjunction with this.
Well, Mr. Grable, with all due respect, you know, some of this conversation is amongst my colleagues here is a little bit news to me, you know, in light of the conversations that we've had over the last several months regarding, you know, what is in the plan, you know, to date. And again, with all due respect, with respect to what you're suggesting along the riverfront, I, you know, personally wouldn't support that.
Okay.
You know, something on the scale, on the size that it sounds like you're talking about. Not that I wouldn't support it in our community, but not along the riverfront. That's just
I'm
one
actually
person's
talking
opinion.
about moving the road over and putting it in the flat area of the river valley.
Well, and I'm not sure we can, in my opinion, that in what, you know, my mind's eye, you know, would be appropriate for what I would think of a cultural arts center, that we could move it far enough east to accomplish what you're talking about, or that would even be the appropriate location for it. But in any case, you know, I don't think we're going to solve that this evening.
No,
you
you're
know,
not.
in the course of this, you know, commenting on matters that are not on the agenda.
But you know,
Mr.
Pat,
Gerber.
too, the scale
Excuse
of...
me, John.
Excuse me.
I think Rick wants to make a comment.
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay, thanks. No, this might make headlines because Amy and I are going to agree on something. So, but Amy, I do agree with you, Kathy, and Marilee. And you know, I don't know where we are, Marcia, in the timing. I really don't know. But you know, I think maybe we ought to take some looks at this, and explore some options. You know, I would like to think we're not too far along. I certainly think there's a lot of wonderful aspects of the Bridge Street corridor, and look forward to that in going forward. But you know, we're going piece by piece here, and I think I'd like, for one, to see what the roadway is going to look like, because I can't not describe to myself, let alone anybody else, what it is. And I'd like to see that, and maybe there are some options that we can consider with respect to this idea that's been brought up tonight.
Well, we can provide information as to what the road is going to look like. And then part of the other issue is based upon the current recommended alignment or realignment, there is the public improvements that are being reviewed and evaluated. A good example is the pedestrian bridge and how it lands at both sides of the river. And then also the private development that is investing a lot of resources based upon that current realignment of the road and their proposal that they presented as recently as the community forum at OCLC. So based upon the preliminary alignment study and the determination as to where the roadway should be relocated, a lot of efforts are moving forward with both the public and the private development. And I don't disagree, looking at, you know, the time frame that we're working under now is just a blink in time when you look at the community overall. But also it gives us the opportunity to look at other places within the district, whether it's the OCLC site or someday it is the school site. You mentioned we don't have to do anything for 20 years. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in that 20-year period and where it makes sense to put a facility like that.
Those are really legitimate arguments. I just hope that the council, in their wisdom, takes enough time to look at the riverfront, because I think it's unique in its position in the city as a place to do it. It bridges the river, it bridges both sides of the community, It gives a reason and a rationale for realigning that road and gives the best access for parking that I think you're going to get. You know, we often forget because we're so busy doing what we do. If you're coming to this community and you want to visit a vibrant downtown, there's an awful lot of people come to Central Ohio to see the zoo at the other end of Riverside Drive. And, you know, if we incorporate a cultural arts center in that quadrant, in that area, there's a lot of benefits to that that might not be in any other location. But I thank your time, and I hope you come to some resolution.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks a lot.
Can I just quickly, my concern is, Pat makes a great point. If we don't want to mess up now and lose the opportunity, and that's the biggest thing, is losing the opportunity for me, the thought. So I hope we will look at that and make sure we don't lose the opportunity. It also will create a place for the west side of the river to come over to do something. You know, you come over to the cultural arts, and it's a great draw. So biggest thing is, it's now or never. You put in something you don't like and you can't fix it.
Okay.
Thanks, Kathy. Jane
Thank
Fox?
I'm Jane Fox, and I live at 6193 Dublin Road. And I'm here about the Bridge Street Corridor, too. Mainly, I think, just for public, from the public sense of it, from the people that are now looking at what's being presented. And I'm hearing a lot of things from people in the neighborhoods and that sort of thing. And it's hit the paper, and there's a lot of discussion. So I guess I'm here to kind of ask a couple questions and maybe make a couple of suggestions that might help council move on with some of the things they're looking at. I've attended many of the public forums from the very beginning, and all of us are so excited about the idea and the concept. It's a great one. Pedestrian friendliness, I think we love the historic district. I live in the historic district, and I think that everybody is looking forward to that concept. They love the open space idea, and I know in every one of your surveys that the Dublin residents have said that what they enjoy most about Dublin is the open spaces and the fact that the historic district has become so walkable. So in that vein, I would say to you, I think you're right on. You're perfect. Now I've seen this progression, and we've all talked about it, and I've sat in on the meetings, and I think maybe from the beginning concept to where we are today, there might be somewhat of a disconnect. People are looking at it and saying, wow, so much density. Golly, didn't know the buildings would be so big. There's a lot of questions about what it's all going to look like in the end. And it's a huge, massive land. And so what I'm asking is that I know in planning and zoning, some of their concerns were that that the walkability actually did what you wanted it to do, that the roads and the walkability space connected from one end to the other. When I went to OCLC, the street engineers were saying, well, we're still struggling with some of those little aspects and whether or not this bridge goes that way or how it goes. The other thing that planning and zoning brought up to you was that you have to make sure that you get it right. You know, that you don't make the mistake, that the legacy you leave is the one that you want to leave. And it is moving quickly. So I know that the public has opinions about this. And we were all hoping at OCLC, and you had a packed house, that we could all make public comments about it. But one criticism I will have about that is that we all had the little survey buttons, and you were asked if it was the intent or did it meet the objectives of the Bridge Street Corridor. And you could press yes or no. But you didn't ask us how we felt about it. And that was bothersome. If you didn't like it, you had to press no just to be able to say no, whether it was what you needed to say about that particular question. So what I'm asking, I think asking the council to consider is that as you move forward in this exciting phase of Dublin, instead of just presenting to us what this developer wants, could you have some neighborhood meetings? Could you get together in your wards and sit down with some folks and say, okay, now this picture is crystallizing. What do you think? Is this what you want? And then questions like Mr. Grable just said, where would you like your community center? These are huge questions that you're all facing, and if I were you, I would be struggling with them too. But maybe now's the time to actually pull in the community and say, this is what it is, and what do you think about it? And don't regulate us by saying, does it meet an objective? Because that's too narrow. We won't have an opportunity to tell you what we think about this. And, you know, this is going to develop over 20 or 30 years, and take a little breather and ask us, you know, how we feel. I know the people on the east side of the river are concerned about density. Historic District is kind of wondering how it's going to work out. I don't think anyone dislikes the idea. I just think we need you to talk to us a little bit more about it. So my suggestion would be just maybe get out and figure out ways to do that, and maybe, like Mr. Grable was saying, let's not go development by development. You know, I'm hoping that the whole plan will do exactly what you want it to do. But it seems as if we're getting our information through the Columbus Dispatch, what it's going to end up looking like, and I'm not sure that that's how you want the public to receive this. So, you know, maybe find ways that we can help you understand what we as neighborhoods would like to see happen too, and maybe then collaborate with you to make that work. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Marcia, when are the comment cards and all the sort of the digestion of all the comments that we received during and after that forum going to be available to us?
It will be presented to council at their December 9th meeting.
Thank you.
And the information is still out on the website, so if people still have comments and input that they want to provide, the website's available to continue to provide that information.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, there are 7 items listed on this evening's consent agenda. Does any council member wish to remove any one or more of those items?
Mayor, I don't want to remove any of the items, but I do want to talk to the engineer about the LED upgrade. I'm just got a quick question.
If it's going to go into discussion, you need to remove it.
We should just.
John, we're going to remove that then.
Going to remove it?
Okay. All right, so for the remaining 6 items, I would move that we approve the actions requested. Is there a second?
Second.
And if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Yes. Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Moving on to a, excuse me, postponed item, that's Resolution 66-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a collective bargaining agreement with United Steelworkers of America regarding wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment for employees within the maintenance worker, auto mechanic 1, and custodial worker bargaining unit.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Wagner.
Mayor, City Council, most of the pertinent information and a copy of the collective bargaining agreement was attached, and be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
No.
Just want to commend you and your staff and all the parties for reaching a timely resolution to this matter.
Thank you.
And if you'd call for the vote, please.
Yes, Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Yes. Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Great, thank you. Moving on to the second reading of ordinances, beginning with ordinance 87-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds, the maximum principal amount of $12 million for the purpose of paying the costs of improving the city's vehicular transportation system, including Emerald Parkway, by constructing, reconstructing, extending, opening, widening, grading, draining, curbing, paving, and resurfacing, and site preparation, installing lighting, gas, electric, and communication facilities, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and water improvements, signage and signalization, sidewalks and bikeways, streetscaping, landscaping, and aesthetic improvements, acquiring interest in real estate therefore, together with all incidental work related appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you.
Good
Yes.
evening, Mayor, members of council. As you are aware, we discussed these, not only this ordinance, 87-13, but also 89, 88, 89, and 90 at a Finance Committee meeting held almost 2 weeks ago. I believe we answered all your questions that evening, but there was one carryover question. It was requested that we provide the rates as they exist today and what they were that evening. The 10-year rate on November 6th was 2.51%, and today it's 2.61%. So it has increased 10 basis points over a week and a half, roughly. I also wanted to note that pending your approval this evening, we will be holding an investor meeting on Monday, December 25th, for any resident of Dublin or business in Dublin that wants to purchase any of our bonds. That will be held at 5:30 at the Community Rec Center in one of the Talas.
You don't mean December 25th?
I'm sorry, I mean November 25th.
Merry Christmas.
I have year end on my mind.
Marilee, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think the Finance Committee did thoroughly understand, hear what the issuance were for. We had our bond counsel and everybody was with us, and they're also here this evening describing everything, and they came to our last council meeting as well. So you'll note that as we move forward, this one is specific to Emerald Parkway primarily. The other ones are things we've already done in some cases and are reimbursing ourselves. We also have made a commitment, as everyone's aware of, to the Ohio Department of Transportation for the 270-33. I think there's been some confusion as to what these bonds were going to be used for, and I think it's important that we clarify what each one of them individually, which will be read into the record in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks for that point, Marilee. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Could I have a motion then to treat this as emergency legislation?
So moved.
Second.
And if you call for a vote on the emergency?
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mrs. Boring.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
And a vote on the ordinance, please?
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
And Mrs. Boring.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 88-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds, the maximum principal amount of $9 million for the issuance and sale of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of improving the city's vehicular transportation system, including the interchange at I-270, U.S. Route 33, and State Route 161, and U.S. Route 33 between I-270 and neighboring Muirfield Drive by constructing, reconstructing, extending, opening, widening, grading, draining, curbing, paving, and resurfacing, and site preparation, installing lighting, gas, electric, communication facilities, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water improvements, signage, signalization, sidewalks and bikeways, streetscaping, landscaping, aesthetic improvements, and acquiring interest in real estate, therefore, together with all incidental work and related appurtenances thereto, declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nothing further to add.
All right. Marilee, anything to add?
No.
Okay. If I could have a motion to treat this legislation as an emergency?
So moved.
And if you
Second.
call, excuse me, thank you. And if you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mrs. Boring.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mrs. Boring.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 89-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds, the maximum principal amount of $5.7 million for the purpose of paying the cost of improving the city's vehicular transportation system, including within and serving the Bridge Street District by constructing, reconstructing, extending, opening, widening, grading, draining, curbing, paving, and resurfacing, site preparation, installing lighting, gas, electric, and communication facilities, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and water improvements, signage and signalization, sidewalks and bikeways, streetscaping, landscaping, and aesthetic improvements, acquiring interests in real estate, therefore, together with all incidental work and related appurtenances thereto, declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Anything?
No.
Yeah, Tim, I
Yes.
just want to clarify for the record what the purpose of this bond is.
That is correct. This is simply to reimburse the city for one expenditure that we have already made for right-of-way acquisition that occurred earlier in 2013 at Bridgepoint. The second is for a purchase that will be made when we purchase what we call the Wendy's parcel, which is anticipated in June of 2014.
Okay, very fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Steve Mason-Brank has signed up to speak to this matter. If you'd like to come forward, please. You'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Steve Mason-Brink, 3168 Lily Mark Court. I got a couple of questions, or at least one in particular. The roundabout, is it a done deal? Is one question. Is it actually a done deal then with what we're proposing for the
Can
street?
I ask, are you thinking of another option? Because I think, I don't want to speak for the rest of you, but I think that has been something we've looked at and wanted for a long time. So I guess I need to know, is your question that, will we consider a different?
Yeah,
Okay.
are you even open to anything else, or is it pretty much a done deal? The second question, I guess, was any surveys ever done? There's a lot of roundabouts now in Dublin. It seems like they're popping up like everywhere. And most of the people I've talked to that live around them despise them. So I just kind of wonder whether or not any surveys were done on the roundabout to get a understanding as to really what the people think about it. I am guilty, I guess, of not being here earlier on some of these discussions, but I'm just kind of curious as to that, because I really feel that with the traffic that we've got now and the proposals that you're going to do with the Bridge Street actions are going to just bring more traffic, and it's roundabouts, the ones that I've been on up Muirfield Drive, are really traffic messes, in my opinion. And I'm really concerned about the fact of having a roundabout in an area or in a traffic intersection there that is so busy, especially during rush hour times. It is extremely busy, and I can see real plainly that at a rush hour time, nobody will be able to turn left. Coming up Riverside Drive, nobody will be able to turn left there. Not with a roundabout. So is this a done deal?
Well, the evaluation was completed a good number of years ago with regard to looking at different options, and the roundabout option was the preferred and selected option. And as far as survey information, we did survey our residents this past survey in December and asked them about the roundabouts because we have built so many of them. We wanted to get feedback, and 8 out of 10 of the residents surveyed liked the roundabout, and we had positive feedback from the residents.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
I was not to believe that.
And actually, I think the city engineer can probably give you some safety information on those too.
Yeah, I've heard that roundabouts are safer, less accidents. I really haven't seen an accident on that intersection since I've been in the area, and it's, what now, 7, 8 years that I've been in the area. I've also heard, yeah, they're safer, but they don't move traffic as well. And also, I'm not sure whether or not the information that I read about how much more safer they are considers fender benders versus an actual accident, because I'm positive that there are a lot of fender benders on roundabouts. They just don't get me.
Well, we have all the statistics, because every time there would be an accident, it's reported and it's recorded, whether it's a fender bender or whether it's a personal injury accident, so we have all those statistics.
And you're saying that you've determined this several years ago is what I'm being told.
No, we track our accident history currently. We actually keep track of 3 years worth of crash history throughout the entire community. And at all of our intersections where we've converted to roundabouts, the crash history has gone down. The crash rate in particular, the severity ratio has gone down significantly. And I don't think we've ever said that roundabouts are accident elimination, they're accident reduction. But in particular in regards to injury accidents, if you look at our crashes at signalized intersections, particularly the angle crashes, we have a high severity ratio. And it's been a great improvement. And then secondarily, just aside from the safety feature, the capacity and the level of service is far above any signal that we have in terms of efficiency and moving traffic.
I have yet to be in and around a roundabout that actually is an efficient movement of traffic.
If you want to, I mean, we're glad to sit down with you and go through all the statistics and show you the level of service information, but as I said, the statistics aren't made up, they're actual. The crash history is actual, so.
And I think a
We're
good
glad to review
example of some recent roundabouts that were installed that I think there was some concern expressed when we started talking about this was the widening of Emerald Parkway from Rings Road down to Tuttle Crossing. And there were 2 roundabouts installed there, and every day there were long backups with regard to traffic at rush hour. And now you go down there, and it's amazing. You wonder where the traffic has gone, and it's because it's moving more efficiently.
Well, one of them that I am into several times is the one just northwest of Lowe's. And trying to get onto that coming from, it would be from the north to get onto that because of the traffic that's coming through there. You can't get on there to turn left. And the off streets, it may work fine for the main streets going around the roundabout, but if you're on the side streets, it's miserable trying to get onto them. And
I've never
it'll
had
follow
that concern at that roundabout. And I've driven that roundabout several times, and, I mean, I've never had that concern at that roundabout.
I have.
At Shamrock Boulevard.
Are you talking about the one that's where Lowe's and substation is?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
Coming from the north Penn, is it Charles Penn
Oh,
Zone or
Penn
something
Zone,
like
yeah.
that?
I don't
Coming
know,
through there, I have had a hard time getting out there and turning left at certain times of the day because there's so much traffic going on the main portion of that you can't get out there and turn left. And that's my real concern is coming, I live off of Martin Road. So there's a lot of times that I will be coming north on Riverside Drive and trying to get over to Dublin, historic Dublin, or in that direction. And I've got a huge concern that I'm not going to be able to make that left-hand turn or get through there. And seeing the way that the traffic is and how far it's backed up, I really have a problem believing that that roundabout's going to help traffic.
I can tell you under the signal alternative at that intersection, you would not be able to make the left-hand turn because we're not going to be able to accommodate the left-hand turn just as we don't today at Riverside 161. If you're talking going westbound 161 to southbound Riverside Drive, that left is prohibited today. It would be in the future.
Yes. And it will be unless you expanded the road.
Even under the signal alternative, we have a very difficult time making that movement work because the footprint of the intersection need to be so large and the impact on the bridge.
Well, how big are you going to make it to make a roundabout?
On one side, mostly it'll be a 2-lane roundabout, and one side it'll be a 3-lane.
Okay, but you're talking about enlarging the road to make signals work versus enlarging it to make a roundabout. I think the signals would take a heck of a lot less green space than a roundabout.
Unfortunately, that's not true.
If I may make a suggestion, I think there's a back and forth here that's probably not going to be solved in our 5 minutes that we have. But I'm wondering, Paul, I've heard a lot of residents, and we've gotten a couple letters asking folks about that roundabout. For whatever reason, it's, you know, some people love roundabouts, some people don't like them, most people like them, but people have questions about traffic movement. And I'm wondering if maybe, I know that we've gotten on council all the information that we feel we need to make a decision about it, but I'm wondering if maybe you could resurrect some of the old memos, some of the old traffic studies that we've done, and put it together in a memo form, maybe put it on the website, maybe send it to Mr. Mason Brink, and, you know, you made a suggestion that he could come and discuss it with you, because I know,
Right.
you know, we can't do traffic engineering, as you said, by popular opinion. It just doesn't work. But, you know, over the past, you know, my 12 years on council, I've developed a great amount of faith in our engineering department because of the modeling that they have and their ability to forecast traffic movement and how things work, because Emerald Parkway is a great example. I don't know how much time you've ever spent going southbound during rush hour, but we used to have officers at multiple intersections to make sure that people could safely traverse that area. And you really, now you go down there and there is no traffic because it's moving so efficiently, and it doesn't back up at Emerald. So I'm pretty confident about that roundabout at that location, but we've studied it a lot, and I understand you haven't and you don't have that information. So it seems like we could, get that information back out to the public.
could.
That would be helpful to a number of people,
Paul, I
not
think-
just Mr. Masonbury.
Paul, I think also it might be very helpful with that, with the proposed roundabout there at Riverside and 161, that show the flow, if you would, as it pours over to the river toward Bridge and High. I've heard a lot of comments that that may back up, and just, I think that might be helpful to put that on there
Yep.
so we can all see it.
Okay.
I have another concern about the roundabout he's talking about. I wish you would go look at it, because the concern I've heard is that the landscaping is so high that when you want to look at all the traffic movement, that you can't see it. And I know when I go through the other roundabouts, I look, more than just to my left to see if there's a space. So if you would just check out the landscaping there, I'd appreciate it.
Can I ask, Amy, which one were you talking about on Emerald Parkway?
There are two new roundabouts that just began working this past summer. South of Rings Road between Tuttle Crossing, north of Tuttle Crossing, south of Rings Road. There are a number of businesses that are both in Dublin and in Columbus that funnel out onto Emerald Parkway to get, most of the movements going south to 270, Tuttle to 270. So that is an area that we've had very recent experience with, a lot of traffic that used to need certain controls, and now that flows very well.
Okay. Do you have stats on that? Because yes, I would like to see them.
We probably don't on that because it's so new. We don't have any recent, we only have 6 months' worth of any crash history.
Well, and the crash
But
history,
traffic flow would be the.
yeah, the
thing.
number of,
That's
the number of
biggest thing.
cars that go in and out.
Yeah, we've got the past counts. We will not have current counts.
Right. But the crash history, I think, is one thing that's most intriguing to me, because, when I look at crashes, I want to know how many, but I also want to know the severity. And I know that there are fewer crashes, but the important thing to me is the fact that they are fender benders and they're minor property damage versus, person.
I don't disagree with that. Yes,
Individuals that are hurt.
yes, they-
And so,
yes, they are a
that's
lot minor.
huge.
I won't disagree with that. Yes, they are a lot more minor issues. My biggest concern is going to be the traffic congestion.
Right.
And I just don't see roundabouts being more traffic, promoting more traffic flow than traffic lights are.
Well, I wish we could go back in time, and I'd take you in Emerald Parkway down south through that area at rush hour, and we could spend, 15 minutes in my car going from one port to another, and now we'd spend probably 3 minutes just traversing the roundabouts, so.
I'm going to try to find time to go get down there during rush hour.
I think that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay.
And yes, I'd appreciate what you can give me. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mason-Ray.
Thank you.
If I can have a motion to treat this legislation as an emergency.
So moved.
Is there a second? And if you call for the vote, please.
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? Mr. Nissy Zerker?
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Nissy Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? And Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 90-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the principal amount of $12.5 million for the purpose of refunding bonds previously issued by the city for the purpose of paying the costs of various public infrastructure improvements and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. No changes or
This,
nothing to add?
nothing, except this is a different issue. If you want to point out, this is not a new bond. Well, it's a new bond, but for different purposes.
That is correct. We will be refunding our 2009 Build America bonds that paid for improvements in the COIC area, as well as the construction of the Dari tank and sewer lining improvements. Rates are favorable, and plus it gets us out from underneath the ongoing federal budgetary discretionary cuts that could exist in the future, which might jeopardize our interest subsidies.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If I could have a motion to treat this legislation, I'm sorry. Is this an emergency? Yes, it is. A motion to treat this legislation as an emergency, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Nissy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes?
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mrs. Waring.
Yes.
And Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Ordinance 91-13.
Modifying sections 153.057 and 153.058 of the City of Dublin codified ordinances to amend the Bridge Street District general purpose and BCS district intent.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin, whenever you're ready.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ordinance 9113 is a follow-up to amendments council recently approved to the review and approvals section of the Bridge Street District zoning regulations on November 4th. The proposed amendments to the general purpose section of the Bridge Street District regulations primarily have to do with the inclusion of a set of principles of walkable urbanism, and this was a recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to provide a broader set of review criteria for development proposals under the Bridge Street District regulations. And I'd be happy to provide a more detailed overview of those principles if council would like.
I have one question.
Yes.
Hopefully it doesn't take very long. With respect to the Bridge Street Code vertical mixed use,
Yes.
okay, I kind of understand what mixed use means. When it's talking about mid-rise, how high are we talking?
Mid-rise would generally be considered somewhere around 5 to 6 stories, 4 to 6 stories. There's not a specific number that would be associated with that.
And if I recall from last week, some changes we made to the code to, defining walkable areas and the walkable urbanism and the like. We seem to be giving more deference to the Planning and Zoning Commission to review these projects, not only to determine that they comport with the code, but also aesthetically, does it fit with the community, so forth and so on. To what extent, here we have a developer that wants to build a 6-story building. We have a P&Z that says, well, we don't think this is going to fit the area. How do you envision that discussion going? Is there a sufficient, I guess maybe I should ask it this way instead of you commenting, is there sufficient authority for the P&Z to say, look, 6 stories is not going to work here?
Potentially, I would think so. It would be, obviously, there would be a lot of contextual information that would be included in the development proposal. Some of the review criteria have to do with how well does the proposal fit with the surrounding context, both for what's existing in the area and what's planned on other private properties within the area. So certainly, a lot of the criteria have to do with the general character of the proposed architecture in general, and certainly the height is part of that. So although all of the building types that are included in the Bridge Street District regulations do have a range of potential stories that they could be, it would be difficult for the Planning Commission or the Administrative Review Team not to consider just generally, is the height of a building appropriate for that area? So that's certainly one of the factors that the Commission could review and make a decision based on.
Okay, very fine. Okay.
One really quick. Justin, is vinyl siding or vinyl a permitted building material other than the trim, things that we're accustomed to? Like I remember when we did Ballantrae, if you have a building of certain height, it's allowed to be up there just for a maintenance standpoint to make that simpler. Is vinyl a permitted building material?
Not in the Bridge Street District regulations.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Scott Herring?
Good evening. I'm Scott Herring. I live at 3280 Lilymar Court. I have a question about this matter that's before us. Last week, or 2 weeks ago here, a slide was presented, and I am not familiar with the principles of walkable urbanism, but there's a bullet point on there that said, buildings must be easily convertible for change of use, or language to that effect, and I just had trouble wrapping my mind around that. So if I understand it, this ordinance is going to apply to any new construction anywhere in the Bridge Street corridor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Moving forward. So, and I apologize for being so naive on this. I'm neither an engineer nor an architect. I guess I was of the impression that if a client's looking for space to occupy or a building, they go to an architect and say, here's my intended use. Plans are developed, all the state codes are met so far as ventilation and plumbing and electrical uses, and a space is outfitted for the desired use. So to see that the code language is going to say, oh, a building has to be easily convertible, it just sounds like it adds tremendous costs on the front end for a developer. Is that the intent of this?
I think I can clarify. These principles, the way they're worded, proposed to be worded in the code, are actually more guiding statements. So it would actually be more along the lines of buildings should be, not that they are required to be, so that when it is practical and appropriate for the location and type of building, if that building can be designed with some foresight that the use may change based on the character of the area, then that's something that would certainly be encouraged. And similar to Mr. Gerber's question, that's something that the Planning and Zoning Commission or another review body could take into consideration. This actually came up with the informal review of the Bridge Park development last week at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and not for every single building being considered in that area would it be appropriate for buildings to have an adaptive reuse potential, but there may be certain locations where the developer should take a good hard look at whether or not especially a ground floor of a building could potentially adapt to another use in the future, and at least consider that up front before the complete investment is made. So it would not require every single building to be designed in that manner.
I see, because that was one of the considerations. Because if I was looking for a place to live, and there's a lot of talk that some of this high-density development would be condominiums, if I bought a condominium unit in a building, but knew that this code said the building could be easily changed, what was currently a simple office on the ground floor that then was converted to a gym or a daycare or a restaurant or some other use that would greatly impact the space. This is just contrary to what I've become accustomed to here of a parcel being zoned for use and very strong, clear definitions that are expected to stand the test of time, lest they come here for a very clear distinction. So, yeah, I just didn't catch all the maybe sometimes in certain buildings and certain applications, and it wasn't clear to me how this fit into this ordinance and exactly what's being
Mr. Herring,
asked here.
if I could respond, and anybody else, feel free to chime in. This is clearly a different district, okay? This is not your neighborhood, this is not my neighborhood, okay? I live in a, 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2-car garage, okay? It has very distinct rules for what can be developed there, okay? There's not going to be adaptive reuses within my neighborhood, all right? We have distinct, our traditional suburban development. This is something different. If you move there, it's with the expectation that there could be redevelopment. Think of the Short North, think of the Arena District, okay? These are, I don't think that the dry cleaner on the ground floor, that you can expect that will be there 30 years later. Maybe it's not even going to be there 20 years later. There could be a different use there. But it seems to me that it's clear to everybody, that has been studying this concept, that's an expectation that people should have that move into this area, okay? That what you see, to the extent that it's mixed use, all right, and you're talking about ground floor uses, may not be that ground floor use. The ground floor uses will be within a range of uses that are allowable within that district. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, one thing, too, that you mentioned, to follow up with the mayor's comment, when in these kind of commercial areas, even today, in any of our districts, it's not a singular use zoning. So you could have the dry cleaner or the barber shop or a restaurant, but 3 years from there, they could sell their businesses and it could be something completely different within the range that's permissible, which is often even we will say, wow, that's a broad range, because they don't seem to be integrated in the purposes. So that's really not different than what we currently have in that respect. So I don't think, that it's substantially different. And just as an example of the ability of a building to be made into something different, when Kroger's was actually built over there on Sawmill Road, that was one of the features of that zoning was, in discussion with the developer, was that because it was such a large footprint, that they needed to build internally the capability to break it down into smaller footprints if that so happened at some point in time. So it's not an unusual concept, although we haven't particularly had a lot of discussion about that over the years. I recall that one many years ago now was specific to that particular development.
What's happening?
A more recent example, excuse me, a more
Go ahead.
recent example would be the shops at River Ridge, where there was a grocery store in there. Okay, if you remember on one of the buildings that is closer to 161. All right, that's being adapted to a different use. It's going to be an office use of a somewhat non-traditional type. Okay, so I mean, it originally was a grocery store. You know, the grocery store was not successful, and so now it's going to be adapted to a different use. You know, so, you know, I think that the underlying rationale here, you know, is that, you know, we can't guarantee, you know, that a particular business or establishment is going to be successful in perpetuity. And we want the ability for that to evolve into whatever is next, you know, 10 or 15 or 20 years down the road, so that it remains successful and vibrant. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, what we see happening with a lot of these is that they start out as apartments, and then as they become more and more successful, the adapted use is condominiums. Then they make them a permanent housing feature. So when I'm reading this, I also agree with what Tim said. You can't expect these things to be the same business forever. So we have to allow that kind of leeway in the legislation.
I appreciate the remark about the shops over there and that former Sunflower restaurant or supermarket. So maybe this is more common than I realized. I was just hoping that this wasn't a wild interpretation that it could be a residential unit now and then offices later or some other specialized uses. And if this is more common, I just want to make sure this is not an impediment to developers saying, holy smokes, we can't anticipate every conceivable use on the front end. So maybe I've taken this a little far on the front end, but just I appreciate these recent examples.
Well, and it certainly would not be our intent, you know, to add costs, you know, to a development. That's, you know, we're trying to be business friendly here. You know, that would not be our intent. It's not the intent of the code. But fair question. Thank you. This is not an emergency? No. Any other questions or comments? And if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes?
Mayor Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to our first reading of ordinances, beginning with ordinance 92-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Oxford Consulting Group, Inc. to induce it to locate and expand its office and associated operations and workforce in the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Introduction, please. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll give you some background on the company and the project. Oxford Consulting Group provides IT services to corporate clients throughout North America and throughout Europe. And actually, so happens that a few major companies in Dublin utilize their services as well. So staff's been in discussions with the company regarding a consolidation and expansion project. Oxford has 2 facilities in Central Ohio, its headquarters and a sales office that the company has decided to consolidate into one facility. And through those discussions, Dublin has emerged as a preferred location at this point. The project would locate 40 employees to Dublin in early 2014 and create an additional 50 jobs by 2018. So in support of the project, the proposed economic development agreement includes a $20,000 relocation grant and a 3-year 25% performance incentive based on the new 50 jobs. The company would also be eligible for an additional 2-year bonus under the performance incentive if the company chose by 2017 to renew its lease for an additional 5 years. Total value of the performance incentive, including the bonus years, is $40,500. And all told, the city would net approximately $1,241,000 over the term of the project. The CEO, Michelle Kerr, will be present at the next council meeting. but I'd be glad to field any questions you might have at this point.
Very good. Any questions? Well, looks very good. We will have the second reading at the December 9th council meeting. Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 93-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Management and Network Services LLC to induce it to retain and expand an existing office and associated operations and workforce within the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Clary.
So Management Network Services is a healthcare management company, and they specialize in coordination of short-term rehabilitation services in nursing homes and acute care facilities. The company is actually currently located on Blazer Parkway and employs approximately 120 people and plans to create an additional 164 jobs by 2020. The planned expansion has made it necessary for the company to move from their current facility. So staff has been in discussions with the company while they conducted a region-wide search, a very extensive search for a larger facility. Through these discussions, again, M&S identified a site in Dublin as, at this point, as their preferred location. In support of the expansion, the proposed economic development agreement includes a one-time $40,000 relocation grant, which is contingent upon execution of a 7-year lease of a facility of at least 28,000 square feet, and also contingent upon issuance of occupancy permits. And again, the city stands to net approximately $1,729,000 over the term of the project.
Great. Any questions or comments? Okay, likewise, we'll have the second reading of this matter at December 9th council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the resolution portion of our meeting, and beginning with one resolution that was pulled from our consent agenda, that would be 68-13.
Accepting the lowest and best bid for the historic Dublin streetlight replacement with LED upgrade.
Introduction, please. Thank you. Mr. Hammersmith.
Well, I think John had a question.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'd be
Paul,
glad
I
to
had a
answer
couple-
Mr. Reiner's
I
question.
just had a couple questions about this. This says it's covering the historic district for $582,000. Is that what is the exact parameters of that?
That's wherever we have the current kind of lantern-looking fixtures within historic Dublin. Those are the fixtures we will be replacing.
Yeah, okay, so that doesn't go all the way up to the Kroger's area.
Those, I can't recall, I don't believe those fixtures exist up there, so no. So it's wherever we have these current fixtures, we're just going to be replacing them in kind.
You know, I'd like to hear some comment on this. As far as, I know that in a residential case, if you switch over to this kind of utility, you have a 5 to 20 year savings in performance on the lights. And yet this is the only area we're starting this program with, right?
Yeah, a lot of the reason we're starting it is because we're having a lot of maintenance issues with our current fixtures, both the poles and the fixtures themselves.
So in a commercial application, is it the same kind of cost savings?
It's about 50% reduction in electric, is what we've seen with the conversion of our other streetlights from the Kim fixtures to the Cree LEDs.
And again, in the life of the bulbs, is that similar? Or are you talking about utility use or?
That's purely an electric. The lifespan's probably 10 to 15 years. We assume 10 years on the streetlights themselves.
And what's our current life?
Of streetlights? Well, we just, the Kim fixtures, the fixture itself, some of them are probably date back to the mid-90s. But we were routinely placing bulbs and ballast pretty regularly at a high cost. So I can get you those numbers.
No, I'm just curious because I'm just wondering, you know, if we're going to expand this program over the rest of the city. And I also wanted to just check to see if the savings were similar to the kind of savings that people are getting in a residential changeover in this.
Right. Well, I mean, we've currently switched all of our other streetlights. We've been doing that this year. In our commercial areas themselves. So that program's been ongoing. About 1,200 streetlights. We're probably 3/4 of the way through that switch out.
Great.
That started this year.
Great.
So we'll know more about the savings as that project progresses.
Yeah, I'm just sort of curious. I mean, I don't know what the, if you're investing $582,000, what the savings timeline is on this kind of switch out.
Yeah, we can get you that information
I'd be,
as a follow-up.
yeah, I'd be interested in knowing that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Ian, if you call for the vote, please.
Ms. Janice Zerker? I'm sorry, Mrs. Boring? Yes. Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Resolution 70-13.
A resolution in opposition to substitute House Bill 5.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll introduce it.
Thanks. Good
Do you
evening.
want me to comment?
I think-
Would you like me to comment?
No.
Have there been any recent developments or anything any updates?
No, we're waiting. We should hear tomorrow whether they're going to put it on the docket at the Senate this week. We've been told they are. We've been told they're not. We hope not. They're out of session next week, so that would be a welcome break. And then to put it on the first week of December, because we're working with some of the other coalition members again to try to get the bill to be something that we can work on together again.
Any comments? Questions?
Did we send, are we sending a letter? We sent the letter to the House, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
I'm wondering if we need to prepare another letter to our local senators, maybe reinforcing our opposition in addition to this. Just a thought.
A letter to whom, Amy?
To the Senate.
Okay. MORPC is also working, we're also working on actually trying to calculate numbers collectively so that since they don't seem to put a lot of weight in each municipality's numbers, so we've asked a couple of places that have actually come up with numbers with a formula. We've kind of asked, like we've asked Rita and CCA, how did you put your member numbers together so that we can get that information? Then some of our local communities here in Morpsey, well, the Morpsey group, we would like to put that number collectively. You know, when it's a couple $100,000 here or $1 million or $500,000, when we collectively put them together, we think it might be a better statement. And so we're hoping to have that collected before Thanksgiving.
Right.
Another thing that was really interesting to me, I got on a mailing list for an individual who's a representative, Mr. Brenner. I believe he's a Powell area. And he was touting his support of this bill as being such a great thing for business and how this is so business friendly and how it's making Ohio a much greater state, et cetera, and so forth. And I think the counter argument to that that's really important because, you know, everybody wants more jobs. It's a good thing. We want our state to grow. We want our state to prosper. So, you know, when you frame it that way, it's hard to understand. But when you look at what these municipalities and what Dublin does for our residents and for our business residents in particular, and what we're able to do because of our revenue stream and the fact that it's, you know, despite the fact that it's been cut and cut. So I think that that's sort of a counterpoint to that argument because that does get a lot of traction, and as I said, who isn't for a better business climate? But there's that flip side that I think is important to get out.
Well, actually, the truth of the matter is the way that this bill started, it was basically for small businesses, and it was to ease the burden of compliance.
Right.
Somehow that got lost. We did make several concessions for small businesses, and we thought we had pretty much covered that area. We've got standard due dates. We have standard withholding amounts, standard dates. There's a de minimis in there of if you owe less than $10, you don't have to pay it. And if you have a refund of less than $10, you don't get it. So we tried to ease, and that's particularly valuable for people who don't have mandatory filing. For us, it's not a big issue. They still have to file. So, but we did a lot that we feel, there's a lot of uniformity in there, and there's a lot of, they like to tout the fact that there are 600 municipalities and there are 600 forms.
since House Bill 95, there is a generic form, and we don't design the generic form. It's whatever the CPAs or anyone who's preparing their tax return chooses to use, we have to accept it. So really, there's a lot of really good stuff in the bill, but it gets overshadowed by the huge special interest carve-outs that came in at the last minute.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Ian, if you call for the vote then.
Mr. Reiner? Yes. Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right. Moving on to the portion of our agenda designated as other. It's I-270 US 33 Aesthetics Project Update. Ms. Ott, whenever you're ready.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'd like to take just a few moments this evening to update you on the aesthetic design master planning for I-270 and US 33. This project's been moving forward over the past several months with a lot of partners involved, and just take a moment to recognize some of them. David Guillaume with the Arts Council here in Dublin is with us this evening, who has been a great contributor through his agency to this process. And we've been joined by the Ohio Department of Transportation, CH2M Hill, Creative Design Resolutions, CT Consultants, and the EDGE Group. So we've got a lot of very knowledgeable people contributing to the success of this project. And of course, that's possible because of the ongoing support of council and of residents wanting to be engaged as we determine the future aesthetics of this interchange. When setting out on this project, we began asking ourselves, what would success look like and how would we measure it? And we really felt that was creating an implementable design that was welcome to the tens of thousands of drivers that enter through this interchange on a regular basis. And a design that needed to be timeless and sustainable and had qualities to it that were authentic to who we are as a community, that provided a signature look, and that was appropriate to the context of the location of which it was being placed. Through a process, an artist by the gentleman as Stephen Weitzman was identified in his firm Creative Design Resolutions to develop 3 design concepts to help realize what the community views as its identity. And he did that through a significant amount of engagement with our community, through participation of nearly 80 residents and focus groups, as well over nearly 50 residents online, answering questions like, what is Dublin to you? What are you most proud of in our city? Is it more important for the city to keep its small town roots or modernize itself for the future? And through these resident responses, 3 designs or themes were created. And I want to take just a moment to share with you a short video that will encapsulate from the artist's perspective those 3 designs.
We really can't affect the actual shapes of these structures. We really are affecting a more surface treatment to parapets, which are those barriers up on the top of the bridge to keep the cars from careening down, the piers that hold up the bridge, and the walls that are on the sides of the roadways. I think what you'll notice is that the majority of the comments had to do with community, how you all felt about yourselves, but primarily the things that you all enjoyed, which mostly happened outdoors. It was the natural environment. That's the thing that seemed to bring people here. And it was a sense of community and family is what kept people here. And I thought that was very interesting. The first theme is to take and help me if I don't pronounce it right, Scioto River? Scioto River, thank you, Scioto River. The Scioto River, and incorporating that into the MSC walls. In fact, everything that we've designed here is to give you a taste of what you would discover if you decided to stop and visit Dublin. So as you were driving down, you would notice that the piers have a stone very similar to the leather lip sculpture, which I like that stone very much because I think it's a little bit more modern, it's more architectural, and it speaks to something you would discover if you were in the city. The parapet, as you'll see up here, has a knot design that's very simple, travels across. You'll see an element here that almost looks like hands clasping. So we're going to go on just a little quick journey down this road. We did a little visualization. It would have been great to have a little bit more time, but that's pretty much the direction that you'd be going. So as you can see that, at least in this lighting right here, that the river reveals itself to you on the side, and as it does, you are literally taking a trip down the river as you're driving down the street. So that would be the first theme. The second theme really speaks to some other interesting details. So for example, this parapet right here, if you looked at it at first, you might think this has a very Native American kind of style to it. And we thought of that when we were designing it. But if you look at it a little bit closer, you'll notice that, in fact, it's not a Native American design, but that detail right there are golf clubs and a golf ball. And I'll show you that in a little bit closer detail. But if you didn't like those, we could always take them out. So this is very simple to make and wouldn't be very expensive as well. But on the walls, as you see here, what we can do is we can actually take the flora, flowers, trees, leaves, and so on, and enlarge them to enormous size and actually fill an MSC wall with it, which I'll show you here in a moment. This leaf cluster we're doing with 3 panels only, but those 3 panels can then be multiplied. We can add to that particular type of tree and use another type of tree. We can take flowers and enlarge the flowers and really animate this wall with those things that you would see when you came to the city of Dublin. The piers, I started out with an idea of taking corn and making the piers look like an open ear of corn. Everyone in my office thought that was a little corny, so we sort of eliminated that. But it was a seed of an idea which took the piers and opened them up that way on the sides to reveal the same stone that you see on a lot of the walls here, and then on the bridge edge, or the pier edge, the way it looks here. And of course, that same effect, using that stone you would see on these traditional walls you see here, can be incorporated into the piers. So here, as we're driving up 270 now, going under those first 2 bridges that I showed you, and as we kind of look to the right, you can see this effect of these leaves on the MSC walls, which are what these kinds of walls are called, using panels to support the wall itself. One of the things that was told to me when we started was when using and incorporating the ideas of Dublin, Irish, Ireland, shamrocks, and this and that, it would be great if you're going to do that to make it subtle. Don't make it too obvious. So with that comment in mind, we took this design of the shamrock and this Hopewell icon of the claw of the bird, and we developed this design. Now, at first, when you see this design, it just looks like a very strong kind of abstract design. It has elements that you would see when you come into the city, which of course is this stone. It looks very much like that Hopewell Indian claw. But if you looked at it a little closer, or you looked at it another time, or a third or fourth time, what you would discover, in fact, that all of these are shamrocks that are just peeking out in different places on this wall. So very subtle, very elegant. And that, with the incorporation of this parapet that takes a weaved design, and you can have it emerging out of stone the same way as this is doing, or without the stone background, I think they complement each other very well. Here we have piers that have the flora that you would find around this area of flowers and leaves and so on of indigenous trees of this area. And if you felt that was a little bit too much, then we can also make the piers much more calm with just a little detail that kind of ties it into the wall. And we can use the same concept of the tree for the piers, using a fluted form, very inexpensive for phase 2. Or we can use that stone design that was used in a Celtic carving from millennium ago and literally incorporate this into the pier. Anything is possible.
Since last Wednesday's community presentation, the residents of Dublin have been highly engaged. We've received about 240 responses online, in addition to about 45 community members participating in the community presentation last week. And interestingly, some patterns developed with that much input. And the pattern that's beginning to emerge is an overall preference for design theme 3. When we asked the community, what do they like, we didn't ask just what do you like, we asked why, what is it about it you like. We felt that was an important thing to understand why one design's chosen over another. And there was really thoughtful comments that came in. So whether it was theme 1, 2, or 3, it's clear that our communities embrace this as an opportunity of self-expression and self-realization for Dublin, and as a way for them to contribute individually to the collective output that we have from this process. As you know, recently Council appointed a aesthetic design selection committee that includes representation throughout our community on it. That committee met to hear the presentations last Wednesday, and we'll be meeting again this Wednesday to come to some conclusion of which of the 3 designs that they would like to recommend to the Ohio Department of Transportation. And as an important step in that process, that committee would like to hear your input and find out from you which elements of these designs that you find most appealing, that you find as valuable to our organization. And of course, I'm happy to answer any other questions you have about the project as well. Thank you.
Thank you. John, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I want to say that, first I want to compliment Sarah because this is a sort of a short-term project. We needed decisions really fast for ODOT, and I don't think you could have found a better artist to implement this concept. This guy was excellent, Mr. Weitzman, at answering every question from the audience thoroughly. Completely. So I just want to, again, compliment you and the staff. I thought the process was completely democratic, and I want to thank David Goyan for emceeing this. And it actually got down to something you're all very familiar with from our meetings, and that's the sticker choices on each one of these. So when this was all over, the entire audience was given stickers and allowed to pick their favorite post, wall mural, whatever. And it's interesting, now there is something that's come up that I think is, and Sarah in a conversation said to me, well, you know, the first night it was pretty obvious that theme number 1 was way the overall favorite when you looked at the stickers. Then I was talking to Sarah, and she said, you know, something weird is happening. She says, it looks like they're shifting to number 3 on the wall mural. So I did get on the internet, and I looked it up, and with this presentation, you could pretty much see the Scioto scene easily revealed as you're driving through it. And then, but when you get on the internet, and you're going to vote on the internet, it's an entirely different thing. The mural for I thought for the Scioto River scene is sort of just really cloudy and way too much in a distance. And what really looks crisp and clear for somebody who's on the computer and voting is number 3, because it's a very clear representation of an image. So I don't know if we could, if we're going to keep that computer voting going, if we could do something to facilitate a clear image of number one to get the voting maybe back to a fairer medium?
After your comments to me on Friday, we immediately made some adjustments to the webpage for that. That including the 7-minute video, which we can tell from the comments that people are spending time watching the video before they are making their selections. And then we also did review the imagery that was provided to feel that we provided the best representation of the options we had before us. So I appreciate that you called us with that comment. And that the time that we had that conversation, we'd had about 75 to 80, I think, online comments submitted. So there's been a number of them since then that have come in.
No, I want to thank you for making that
Absolutely.
adjustment.
I appreciate that feedback.
No, it's really great, and it's really important that you responded that quickly. So, all in all, it's going to be really exciting. I hope we talk to the artists about the implementation of color into this, which we think would be very interesting, because as you travel from California to New York City, it's not very likely, except for if you're going through the Arizona area, that you're going to see freeways that are dyed out in a different color. So he said that's totally doable. And so it's a nice implementation of another concept that I think would be important to leave a lasting image. And then I think one other thing he was very interested in that he didn't see, but Sarah again forwarded this on to him, was the Shamrock logo. You know, as you saw, there's sort of a, and you didn't catch it in this part of the presentation, but up on the major pilasters that support the flyovers, there's a stylized sort of tree symbol, and it looks sort of like a tree as you're approaching it, and then as you get closer and closer, you can see it's sort of a Celtic knot. It's just really a clever sort of symbology. And something else we thought would be interesting is, I think one of our coolest logos, and I don't know if it could be worked in or not, and he wanted to see it, was our the logo we developed for the Irish Festival, which is the Celtic Shamrock logo. And then another question that I don't know if has been resolved or not. So you pass through this freeway exit, or this freeway system, and you're seeing this sort of really sort of neat bunch of images as you're going through it, and maybe some different colors. But where did you really go through? And so, you know, where does it ever say that you went, that this is Dublin? You know, you might be going around the outer belt, moving across the country or across a portion of the country, but where is the image and the symbology that tells you, you know, this was the city you moved through? So in case you're in a conversation 150 miles down the road at a roadside rest, you say, well, that was an interesting exchange I went through, but what was it? So I don't know if we're allowed to stamp in the cement, like our one image of the Shamrock, you know, it says Dublin with a small d, is very well executed. I don't know if that's even legal according to ODOT rules or not, or whether we have to pay for that up on a railing like a lot of cities. And was that ever resolved, Sarah, do you know?
Sure. I reached out to ODOT last week to ask them to specifically provide feedback on the issue of the incorporation of text anywhere in the project. And the Federal Highway Administration has very specific rules about the incorporation of text. So place names, so the word Dublin, the city of Dublin, Dublin, Ohio, USA, or the name of the road of which the bridge is part of, are the only permissible texts that the Ohio Department of Transportation will allow. The second part of that, though, that is key is what font, and that is actually pretty restrictive. And that looking for a font that would complement a design would be something that we would certainly try to achieve, but would need to take into consideration. I think that a more traditional font would be accepted. Something that is a bit more artistic in approach would not be favorably approved upon by the Highway Administration, which would have some jurisdiction over the placement of that wording. The other question they asked is can that only go on a bridge, for example, on the parapet? Could we put it on a pier? Could we put it on an MSE wall? What are sort of those boundaries? And can we push those boundaries in this interpretation? And I'm awaiting response from ODOT on that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for answering those questions. And again, I just want to compliment you for the, throwing this thing together as quickly as you did, because it was really, it's sort of a rather complex program, And I think you guys ferreted out, your team, yourself, ferreted out the best artists we could have got on a short-term basis, who actually had a lot of experience doing this across the country and has a really strong reputation in getting this executed. Because not only is an artist, he's also tied to a manufacturer that can execute this quickly. So this is a fast-track design project, and I think you guys did a good job getting to the bottom of it. So thank you.
Thanks, John. Mayor Lee?
I think it's magnificent. I was able to participate in the one community meeting that he held, and I thought it was very constructive in terms of the what people had to say. And I think that it might have been a little bit different than we might have thought going into those conversations. But I think he's captured it marvelously. And I wondered myself sitting there, oh my gosh, how's he ever going to do this? But obviously knows what he's doing. I was, initially I was really attracted to one, and I was not attracted at all to two. But I became extremely attracted to three. So should I go online and vote, or?
You're certainly more than welcome to. You live in town.
Yeah. But I'm sure that one or three, either one would be excellent. I just think three, for me, captures the past, the present, and the future more than one does. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
I likewise had a lot of admiration when I went to the first meeting with him, thought he really could, from his examples, interpret what the communities look like. I have already voted, so only I used my husband's name, so. So it wouldn't be
So your
thrown-
secret's
So you
out.
falsified your vote?
Well, then, so you want to throw it out. Well, actually, I used kind of a combination. My question is, all these things are really interesting, and, he does the corn and whatever. And this may not be appropriate because it may be too much iffies here and there, but let's say you like the corn for the piers and you like this other thing for the design. Have you ever thought about, well, I really like this in conjunction with this, or is it the whole thing that as he gives this?
Mr. Weitzman was open to the idea of mixing, so if there's a particular parapet or pier, perhaps with a different wall mural approach, he's open to that conversation. I think you want to understand a little bit about why that particular combination, but he certainly wants to be part of that dialogue.
Well, I just wondered if the committee had looked at different things like that that they would prefer or suggest.
I think they will when they meet on Wednesday.
Okay, and they probably have a better feel than the pictures. By the way, some of these pictures are magnificent from the past in there. So, I do have which one I really, really like, but any one of these is going to be great, and I really like what's going on. So thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Rick?
Well, definitely number 2, you can scratch off the list as far as I'm concerned. And when I first looked at this, I really like theme number 1 because, a lot of Dublin for me has been, the emphasis that we've placed on what I call our core values of open space, parks, outdoors. I really like that. But as I look at number 3, I guess if you're driving by on the highway and you're trying to set a theme for the town, I don't know how many people are still looking at us as open space and all those things. So I guess some variation of the Shamrock is fine. So, either 1 or 3. I guess I can live with either one of them. The one part that I did like was what's it called? The beer nose? Pier bull nose?
The bull nose.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of neat. And did I see that in both themes?
Yeah, so real
Parts?
quick, what we're referring to is this image right here.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That, and right here is where it's used on the bull nose of the piers. This is particularly important on phase 2 of construction. If some kind of iconic imagery like that is used, because those will be very large piers to support that phase 2 bridge, and being able to make them interesting, and welcoming.
I mean, that does capture our fondness for trees. It's kind of like a tree of life in a sense. So I really like that. But I could live with either one or three.
Thanks, Amy.
I like the idea that Kathy suggested about maybe mixing and matching some of the elements. I too really like that pier bull nose design. It looks like a tree of life, it looks like a shamrock, and it looks like a Celtic knot all mixed in one, which I think is very, very cool. I just think it's awesome that we're doing this. I think this is going to be something that people are going to ooh and ah over, once it gets up and, they realize, oh my gosh, we've got this beautiful piece of public art in the middle of a freeway interchange, only in Dublin. I mean, there are other places, obviously, but I think ours is going to be the best ever. Obviously, I'm prejudiced. But I like number 3. I like number 1 a lot, but one of the comments that was given was, as you're whizzing along at 60 miles an hour, are you really going to be able to appreciate that mural? I mean, it's a beautiful work, it's a beautiful mural, but is it going to be, are you going to be able to look at it and realize what you're looking at it when you're moving that fast? And I don't know the answer to that. So I like both 1 and 3, but I like 3 for the fact that it is more, it seemed like more colorful, there was more contrast, and it would be able to be appreciated as you're going by.
Amy, as you're going across 75 on 70 out for Wright Pat, has some rather interesting designs of aircraft and things.
Right.
And actually, you do see them.
Okay.
You really do.
I'll have to make a point to look.
I mean, you don't stare like this, but
And we certainly don't want people to have to stare like that.
But they do catch your eye. And you kind of get the flavor to the theme.
Yeah. Yeah, so for that reason, I'll leave it to the artists in the group and the people who are far more creative and better at this sort of thing, but I'm just excited about the whole thing overall. If I had to vote tonight, I guess 3 would be it, but I'm open and excited about whatever comes.
Thank you. I like the use of the limestone. I guess we see that in I guess mostly 3. We see a fair amount of it in 3. But one other comment that I would make in 3, just 2 of the images that were presented to us for the flyover piers. The first one, the A versus the B. I like the use of the Celtic knots more than I do the vertical lines. The vertical lines I don't know, institutional comes to my mind or whatever. I mean, it just doesn't look as creative. It looks more to me anyway like something you would maybe see anywhere. And I'm just looking for something unique and distinctive. So anyway.
Sure, and that was an example of combining sort of an off-the-shelf liner, a mass-produced liner with a custom liner adjacent to it.
Right.
With those fluted columns.
Right. So you think you got enough feedback?
We love it, yes. Thank you
Okay.
so much. We appreciate your time.
So what happens next?
So on Wednesday, the selection committee will meet prior to the operating budget workshop to sort through all 3 designs and determine a recommendation to the Ohio Department of Transportation.
Okay. Well, very good. As John pointed out, I mean, we're kind of on a fast track here and appreciate everybody's time and effort, to make this happen. I think Amy said, and I think we all agree, that, this will be, very unique. I mean, hopefully take something that, certainly it's going to be an improvement to the transportation system, but, also something that we can capitalize on, if you will, to make it a little more appealing as we drive more efficiently through this new interchange. So anyway, thank you.
If I just have a quick follow-up question, you may have stated this and I missed it. Do we give all 3 of the designs to ODOT, or are we only giving our primary choice?
So the Ohio Department of Transportation has all 3 designs now under review because we wanted a technical review. If there's certain elements that may not be permitted, I'll give you an example. If there's hesitancy about having a human image in one of the designs. And so we want to hear that from them. Do they feel that is a driver distraction? So we felt like we needed to have them see all of the designs at this early stage to let us know. I will tell you, ODOT participated in a technical review meeting with us before we showed them to the community. There were a few things we did not show the community because we knew right off the bat that ODOT could not support them. They were very open and honest with us. We've been fortunate to have a great partnership with them through this.
Okay, thank you very much. Proposed soccer field use policy, excuse me, Mr. Ehrman.
Good evening. Before you this evening is a proposed soccer field use policy for your consideration. As you know, we are continuing to strive to provide the best opportunities for the community and the 3,500 kids playing soccer out on our fields, and trying to make all of the organizations trying to make that happen satisfied, as well as trying to meet our city philosophies and cost of services, et cetera, for all those considered. It sounds like an impossible feat, but I can tell you that for the past several months, we've been researching a lot of different models throughout the country as to the different types of offerings provided for these types of services. And we've taken components of it or them and put together a series of components that are in the policy today. And I can't explain just how complex the process has been for the last several months. No, I can't. As you know, it's been a very touchy subject at times, and to the level at which this involved the organizations for each of the soccer components that are in this policy. We spent a lot of time working on this together, and the end result before you this evening is a consolidation of all of our thoughts and what we felt would be the best way to serve the community. It's important to note that the adoption of this policy would actually replace all of the current agreements that are intact today, and over time they would be phased out with this to be implemented. So this evening I have a brief presentation, and I promise you I'll stay about 30,000 feet above the level here and not get down into the details, but I'd be happy to answer whatever questions you have as we go forward. Just to quickly discuss some of the objectives of this, we went into this with a series of them and hoped that we would achieve all of them, to which I think we have. And basically, it's taking a more proactive administrative approach rather than the agreements and reacting to some of the issues that we were trying to deal with, and develop a permitting process that would require an application and then a vetting process that's based upon the city's guiding principles, a list of criteria for allocation of the uses at various levels of play, identifies all of the different types of uses and the types of permits that would be required for each, and then create a fee structure that's consistent with other city services, not just to recoup some of our costs, but to implement a fee structure that actually incorporates the private market in some of our offerings. Additional to that, it also established some common organizational prerequisites that in order to qualify for any of the priority allocation table, you have to come forward with a certain level of prerequisites intact. And then one of the things that we certainly took into account was the administration of this policy, the accountability level to which, how would we hold each group into account for any violations in the policy and so forth, and those are all addressed. And certainly the enforcement factor has always been an issue, and if we don't know the problem exists, it's hard to enforce some of the policies that we have in place. So this also incorporates an enforcement factor. In fact, you'll recall at the budget hearing just a few weeks ago, I briefly discussed that there are funds into the 2014 budget for the administration of this policy and the enforcement factor. And then, of course, it also includes an administrative certain level of flexibility so that there's some give and take on the intent and what this policy was trying to achieve in the first place. So just to discuss a little bit, I did talk about the involvement from each of the soccer organizations. This policy has been vetted fully by each of those organizations and their board of directors who have voted on the policy. and have voted to comply and agree with the contents. So that is one of the major feats of this whole process, is to get them on board with it. And then the implementation of it is fairly tricky, although we have worked through significant planning processes and administration processes that will phase in this entire program through the 2014 season and then the tournaments segment into the 2015 season. And I won't go into the details of why that is, but it's just a matter of staging everything so that we can implement it without too many ripples in the equation. In the policy, we've identified the different types of uses, and I thought it was very important to point out, first of all, that a general public use of all of our parks is first and foremost one of our primary priorities, and then certainly no permit is required for any non-organized activity. So the general public certainly has all of the abilities to use our parks whenever they wish. The league play, the tournament play, and all the other organized uses is where the permitting process will come into play. And each of these components is spelled out in this policy, as well as the appendices that exist to reflect those different scenarios. Starting off with the league play, and I promise you I will go through this quickly, but I just wanted to point out the development of the league play process here in the permitting is twofold. One is the prerequisites that the organizations themselves have to come to the table with. It's a common list of criteria that each of the organizations have to come forward with in order to be recognized by the city. And then the second component is a priority schedule with each of the organizations outlining the types of services they're providing and then falling into the table of priorities and fee structures accordingly. So I'm not going to go through each one of these, just to show you that there are some common rules and understandings and expectations from each of the organizations to meet these requirements prior to them getting any type of priority for the fields. They would fall into the last place of our priority schedule if they did not comply with each of these components of the policy. And then second, this is the meat of the policy that affects the majority of the organizations. Some of the philosophical misunderstandings and disagreements and things that have been primarily our difficulties throughout the years. And without going into each of these specific squares and cells on this chart, you can see on the left-hand side, those are the requirements for each of the organizations to the level to which they comply with those. And the priority one goes to the City of Dublin programs in the event that we need those fields for our own general purposes. Certainly, it has not been a problem in the past, but for our own interest, we felt that the city certainly needed to be in the priority one. The priority two is the general recreation component, and you'll see the asterisk by the Dublin Soccer League. It is indicated in this policy that the long-standing relationship that we have with the Dublin Soccer League and their ability to provide the general recreation programs, that they be the only organization providing such in order to create consistency throughout the community. And then you can see the list of requirements for each of the, or all of the general recreation program. The priority three column there is the middle tier level, which is the step above recreation and just a step below the select and the elite levels. There's an asterisk there indicating that Dublin United is, so long as each of the organizations are eligible under the provisions in this policy, would have the preferred priority within that step. It does not exclude any other organizations providing that same service. And we've come to the conclusion that by providing somewhat of a free market at this upper level eases some of the complications that we have as a city trying to influence each of those organizations and identify how it's structured and the programs they provide and so forth, and allow these organizations to create these programs in these different categories. Then the priority four is obviously the select and the elite level, to which Club Ohio and Ohio Premier at their select level would be the higher priority within that column. And then priority five is everybody else, whoever doesn't meet the standards or comply with the prerequisites. You can see there's a lot of no restrictions there, but the price tag on being able to play at that level is almost prohibitive in a lot of cases, and it represents more of the free market the private sector free market rate for rental of fields, that the city would not be subsidizing any component of that organization or that level of play. So before I move on to any more slides, I don't know if anybody had any specific questions about this detail.
Go back to where you talk about the public use, like 4 slides back. No permit required. But do they have to apply for, I mean, how do you have to have, they have to let you know, right?
Not necessarily.
So what?
Our public parks are first come, first serve, unless you're having an organized activity that you need to dedicate space, and through that dedicated space would require a permit in that case.
So if I get a permit to play on that field for that day at that time, and there's a general public use, that's what I'm asking. How do you balance that?
Well, if you'll bear with me as I go through, there is a cost for a permit for residents to reserve fields. If you wish to reserve a field, you can do so, but there are provisions for you to do that.
But you're telling me here that the general public can use it any time.
On a first come, first served basis, yes.
So they do have to go to you for a schedule.
Not necessarily.
They don't necessarily have to. If it conflicts with our Dublin Soccer League schedules for all of the organizations and all of the league play, if it conflicts with them, and John Muir is here from the Dublin Soccer League, we've always worked with the general public and tried to work with the space and the shared use. And
Okay.
I don't know that there needs to be a written policy to address the issue at this point.
If I go out with my kids and you're telling me I get that field, and then somebody else comes along and says, well, I've got the schedule, then I, as a general public, leaves.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So moving on, the other component in this policy deals with our sports tournaments, our soccer tournaments. There's no real change in the soccer tournament world in the permits that we require and so forth. We did make a change to the fees themselves, to which we have increased our fees to a little bit more reflective of the private sector market. You can see here it's tiered based on the recreational league play. For the Dublin Soccer League, the fee is waived. The Dublin not-for-profit organizations would be $100 per field per day. Non-Dublin-based not-for-profit at $500 per day, and then the for-profit organizations at $1,000 per day. There's always been a question as to what tournaments we already recognize and why we can't offer more tournaments. And I thought I'd share these with you just to reflect the tournaments that we do recognize here in Dublin: the Dublin Soccer League Charity Cup, the Coles Cup, the Club Ohio Nike Cup, the Ohio Premier Invitational, Dublin United Champions, and then the Dublin United Ohio Champions League is representative from 5 different jurisdictions, so it's rotated on a 5-year schedule here in Dublin and throughout the rest of those jurisdictions. And then any other organized use, we have the same the same fee structure for those purposes, and it just identifies here for all other uses that there is a permit required, and you can submit that application for that permit based on the different types of camps, clinics, and training programs that some of the organizations are providing. So a lot of these things will be implemented throughout 2014 and then 2015, depending on the nature of each. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize those who have been very heavily involved with the development of this policy. They're here this evening: Mr. John Muir from Dublin Soccer League, Randy Smith from Club Ohio, Mike Scolari from Ohio Premier, and Ken McMahon from Dublin United. And be certainly happy to answer any questions, or if any of these gentlemen have any answers for you, they'd be happy to speak as well.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Mary Lee?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for completing this task. I actually pretty much understood it, which was a little frightening because I've never understood them at all in the past. The only question that I have and concern I have is the implementation timeframe. And that I know you don't want to go through the details about why it can't be done before I assume you mean the end of 2015 in total. But I do think that that seems too far out for me.
Well, I think the political answer is everybody has given a lot of concessions towards the development of the policy, and this is one area where the fees are really the driving factor. And, you know, depending on which nature or which segment of the policy you're referring to, you know, the league play itself, the real soccer seasons begin in fall. So this is setting up for the next fall season. So we will actually start the application process next spring with the anticipation of full implementation and fee structure in place by the fall of 2014. As far as the tournaments, most all of the tournaments have been scheduled already for 2014, and for those tournaments, the budgets have already been set, and so for the implementation of a new fee structure, it would really throw a wrench into those plans. So we've worked with each of those organizations to accommodate that.
I certainly understand that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Matt, thank you very much. Thank you to all the representatives involved for your cooperation in reaching this agreement, and we look forward to its implementation. We appreciate it. I think we're voting. I would move that we approve the field use policy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. Ann, would you call for the vote?
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Great. Thank you all very much. Moving on, fee waiver for the use of the Talas. Matt?
In your packet is a copy of a letter from Ms. Christina Fedwick requesting a fee waiver for the use of the Talas in the Dublin Community Recreation Center for 2 hours for the purpose of a fundraiser yoga class to benefit the Maria T. Berry Foundation. Staff has reviewed this request and felt that this was a unique request in that it was a one-time request, and it was dedicated towards the general welfare of the entire community. And so at this time, staff is recommending the approval of the request, but I know Mrs. Fedwick is here and would like to say a few words on behalf of this.
As if you'd introduce yourself and give us your address, please.
Christina Fedwick, 151 Longleaf Street, Pickerington.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me here. I worked at 10 TV for 10 years with Dom Taveri up until about a year ago, where I left to become a personal trainer, now in Canal Winchester. But the 10 TV family is still my family, and we're all very affected by Maria's passing. Dom is from Dublin, his family is here. A lot of people were affected, and maybe some of you know who she was. And we want to do something that brings some hope and inspiration back to the city. So I happen to be a part right now of the yoga certification class, which is here in Dublin every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday for 12 weeks at Lifetime. So we came up with an idea that let's do this class in her memory. Maybe it can be something we do every year as it grows bigger. I talked to Maria's mom this morning, and she said, "You really think you can get 200 people there?" And she was thrilled about the idea. So if we can, we'd love to. And we have talked several times at the Dublin Rec Center. I went and looked at the space. It looks terrific. Looks like something we'd love to do. All the funds will go directly to her foundation, which is the mariataberryfoundation.org, if you want to see it on her website, which is going towards a couple of things. One, towards defensive driving, which is Dom's big passion now, and for any education towards the elementary school where she went here in Dublin, and a college fund set up in her name because the crazy girl wanted to go into the media. So she was majoring at Ohio State in graphic arts and media relations. So we want to carry that on for her. And if this is one of those first steps, I'd love to have the help of the fee waiver so that the money that we do raise goes to that.
Okay.
Very good. Any questions, comments? All right, thank you very much.
I'll make the motion to waive the fee.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you very much. Ann, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Very good. Good luck. Thank you. Staff comments?
In addition to the opening of,
Wait, we have
Excuse
that.
me?
Oh, no, that's afterwards.
Go ahead.
in addition to the opening of the brand Coffin Roundabout, which everybody can see and use, we also opened or started the water tower. It was put online last Friday, so that's a pretty big deal to get that project completed and online. And I would just like to say at this point, Kathy, that persistence is a good thing. That's how we get all the things done that we get done here in Dublin. And just to say, it's been a real pleasure to serve with you. And I think it's kind of hard to believe that you won't be here. So I wish you well and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Amy, you want to lead off, then I can certainly come back to you, but with respect to the code of conduct, code of conduct for board and commission members?
Certainly. I'm having a heck of a time tonight, speaking without coughing, but we have the code of conduct before us, and I would just recommend that we begin to implement this. I think our existing board and commission members can be asked to sign and agree to it, and then obviously going forward, all of our new board and commission members would as well.
Okay, if that's a motion, I'll second it.
Any discussion? Ann, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll go back to roundtable. Rick, we'll let you lead off.
Kathy, is this your last meeting?
I hope so.
Okay.
There's a budget meeting, but I think Mr. Peterson will be active, not active, but attending that, so he knows what's going on.
Well, unfortunately, I can't make it Thursday night, 'cause I'm part of the other, participating in the Dublin Police Academy, which you can still do. You don't have to be a council member to do that, but I just want to say thank you. I first met you when I started with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Traffic task force.
Oh, task force, yeah. Yeah, you have a better memory than I have. That's back in 1995.
I'm sorry, I should be, I'm sorry.
That's right, you did. God, that's right. But I just want to thank you. I've learned an awful lot from you over the years. And particularly, you helped me to embrace what I call the core values of the city, with our open spaces, our well-planned neighborhoods and the like, and I will always feel indebted to you for that, and I want to thank you so much. And one thing, we had a case on P&Z, a matter, well, we did, and we had a lot of them, and this dealt with the over at Kaufman, I think they're called the Kaufman Apartments, or the condos over there, Steve, where you live, and we're talking about the pond over there, and
I was hoping we wouldn't get to this since you weren't there Thursday.
well, I thought, well, since I'm not going to be there Thursday, I wanted to bring it up. But we're talking about the pond, and, how many fish will be in there, and there was some concern by Kathy that because there will be a lot of people walking around and the like, that, will this hurt the fish's ears? And we all kind of laughed about it. But I'm going to say that, actually, recently I did look up where, fish do hear. They really do. So you were right.
I like to be colorful when I make a comment, and I was concerned with that fountain that they used, that the fish would be affected.
Yeah.
So I put it in those terms so you could understand.
Well, it turned out that you were right. So,
Thank you.
but it made
you
but
top
anyway, it's been a privilege to serve with you, Kathy, and to you and Mike, as always, best wishes.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Rick. John?
No, I just want to reiterate what Rick said. In 16 years with you has been really enjoyable. And you know what? You made me laugh. And some evenings, this job, gets a little stressful. But you've always added humor to this, and had a certain way about you that lightened the load for some of these some of the events that have taken place here. And I think of you more as Dublin the institution because of the time you've been here with us. I mean, you're the only person still on this group when I arrived, and
What's that say about you?
and like Rick said, I have learned an awful lot about you, and I think you were certainly a community advocate, and I just want to thank you, and I just really enjoyed the time we spent together. It was really a lot of fun.
Thanks, John. Mary Lee?
I'm going to say one thing, not related to Kathy, before I talk about Kathy. I would like to recommend that we do have some kind of town meetings to get more input into the Bridge Street corridor. I think that we heard quite a bit of that tonight from the people that spoke about Bridge Street. And I think that they're not in opposition to the direction that we're going, but believe that community dialogue will even give us better ideas than we might already have. And I think that that's always been a foundation of Dublin and the growth of Dublin and how we've done it. And I think we need to go and add that to the processes that we're using. And I think that we'd find that people are very supportive of it and will understand it better as well, as maybe new ideas as well.
Yeah, Marilee, I fully agree with that. And I think these forums ought to be more of, let's listen to what the residents say instead of preaching to them. I think we heard a little of that tonight, and that's been my observation, even having participated in some of these workshops where I felt that some of staff and the consultants were, well, that's fine, Rick, you may think that, but we already have an idea. And I think it ought to be more of, let's listen to the folks and let's see what they come up with.
Could I just add something? I just want to make sure that I'm clear, and I don't know whether staff has this question or not. But to the extent, that we have, people that have an interest, a financial interest insofar as they've made investments in land and that sort of thing, and, they're relying on certain decisions that we've made up to this point, with respect to roads and infrastructure and so forth. What is our message to them? And because if I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps even millions of dollars, I'm looking for loans and so forth, I want to have some certainty, about moving forward. And so I guess that's the question I'm asking of my colleagues, with respect to the outcome. I agree with you, Mary Lee, that the dialogue is important. And as we go forward, but I guess that's just the question that I would put out there.
I think there's a fine balance between whether I'm not suggesting necessarily that we need to slow a process down. But I am, what I'm hearing and what I believe strongly in is that there needs to be places in the process that's established where we can have more engagement of actual dialogue. And I had a conflict, so I wasn't able to go to the meeting at OCLC, but if it's accurate, Ms. Fox is saying, in terms of the questions that were asked and the way you could answer them, that is sort of directive then. It's not really an engaged dialogue. And I don't need an answer tonight about whether that was really how it happened. Like I say, was it?
It was definitely that way, and I felt very much. They showed the pictures and they said, does this meet the intent? And that was all 4 questions, and you didn't get any other option to contribute any other opinion.
Well, there were a lot of opportunities to provide feedback were in direct conversations with staff, and of course, we can't know about all those conversations, and there were conversations with individual developers as well. But there was also the comment cards, and there was also the opportunity to provide input online. And, you know, all of those things, I think we need to see, you know, what came out of those, which was why I asked when that's going to happen, which I guess is our next meeting. And I agree with you, Marilee, public engagement is important. It's just, you know, what, to the point that Tim makes, you know, what are we going to do with that information? And if you have, you know, I think my frustration has been, and I've said this before, you know, we've been going through this for years and years, and now we're to the point where we're ready to implement, and all of a sudden we're hearing, you know, some negative comments, but are the negative comments based on things that are not understood? You know, Mr. Herring came up with some good points, and I think he realized, oh, well, you know, I understand better. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but, you know, it was sort of an understanding thing. But what are we going to do with that feedback? And we have a planning and zoning process, which I understand we amended it slightly tonight, to allow people to come to Planning Commission and provide input about particular developments, and, you know, allow Planning Commission to weigh in based on, you know, traditionally what they do is they hear from the developer, they hear from staff, they hear from the public, and then they weigh that and make a recommendation. So,
Well, I think that, you know, we've all been in receipt in the last week of a number of emails from people. And most of the information, which I expected because they said an email, they were all coming tonight and were going to raise these issues with us, and of course, none of them came, which is a choice that they have personally made. But I had actually gone through the documents, the emails, that outlined what this, that, and the other thing, you know, none of which were accurate information. So, you know, Mr. Roth and others have elected not to give the comprehensive picture accurately to people of what the plan really is. And so I think we have an obligation to offer opportunities to people to come, even if it's just in here, and, you know, to have an open dialogue about what the real facts are and answer their specific questions and listen to whether they have any ideas. I think that, yes, we have the document here, which we had requested, of how many times in the last 3 years, I mean, this is a 3-year, almost 4 now, I guess 4 years, it started in 2009, process. So it's not something that, as some people have suggested, they only just learned about, that we have, and even Ms. Ott has suggested something that has changed a lot in the last 5 years, and that is how people are receiving information. And so we have 45 people show up for the art, but we have 200 responses on the internet to respond to the choice. So, you know, things happen pretty rapidly right now in terms of the way people are receiving information, the way we they communicate to public entities. And I just think it's always better to be able to hear the people directly. And I think that, unfortunately, one of the negatives to email is that this is the kind of information that can be going around that isn't really ever corrected to the people that are writing the information.
I appreciate your clarification of that, and I am supportive of that, and I think that that also answers the question that you put out in terms of what, you know, private investors and private developers who are interested in this area can expect from us. So.
I do feel, though, that, and I've been concerned from day one about this, you make one bad move and you're stuck with that, and then what happens after that? So I don't think, the one thing that really upset me was when we took this tour, the one developer came out and said, this is what we're going to do on the east side of the river. And I'm going like, really? It hasn't even gone through the process yet. So I think that nothing is definite, but I totally agree with Marilee about the emails that were going around were just filled with misinformation, especially that one that said they were sorely disappointed, bitterly disappointed with my representation. We know, we know that was totally wrong. So in any case, and when I went to NLC, there was one booth there that they have done this, but they did get citizen input as far as different parts of the plan. Again, we've been at it for 4 years, so citizens do have to take some accountability. None of them were there at the P&Z meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where you make changes. We don't do the zoning. That's where you can make changes. So I felt very beat up after the last session because they didn't go to the P&Z meeting. But I do agree heartily that we need to have some dialogue.
Well, perhaps staff could come back with some recommendations about how we might further engage folks and provide that opportunity.
As we move through the process, right?
And I think there, like in any process, there's always going to be misunderstanding, bad information. And part of what we want to do is provide good information. And the response that was given to Mr. Roth today will continue to make responses to those individuals who have sent in emails and have misinformation in there and clarify it and recognize that, you know, even once they understand, there are going to be still some people that disagree with what we're doing just because that's what happens in everything you're doing, especially if it's a big project like Bridge Street. You can't expect to have 100% everybody happy. But, you know, I think providing opportunities to educate and update information and receive feedback on what's being done is only a good thing, and we have no problem with providing additional opportunities, and that was the intent of OCLC. And the idea of the clickers was to get some quick feedback, along with, as Amy mentioned, the fact that we had comment cards, had opportunities for people to have individual discussions, and also the information is still out on the website, and people have the opportunity to provide feedback and make comments on the website.
Well, like what's mentioned in the letter, referenced in the letter to Mr. Roth by Mr. Langworthy is that it's on the second page, first full paragraph, that we're in the beginning stages of this process, and that surely there will be opportune time for additional input, so forth and so on, and more dialogue with developers. So to answer Tim's question, if that's what our director of planning is saying in this letter to a resident, then I would hope that they are equally saying this to the developers, that we're not that far along, guys. You know, so.
Well, I think
it's
as far as the actual development and what's in the development and height and architecture and things like that, there's changes. But I think, you know, what I mentioned earlier was the fact that the preliminary alignment, the information as far as the realignment of Riverside Drive is our understanding and our assumption based upon our public investment. That is where it's set currently, and that's what everybody's working off of, both on the public side and the private side. And the mayor's point is well taken. You know, developers are investing a lot of money based upon this alignment that was established for Riverside Drive.
And, you know, that was a very thorough piece of work, that whole engineering. And I don't know if Mr. Grable got that or not tonight, but, and then the idea of, you know, you've got people constantly throwing out ideas after, like Marilee said, after 4 years of this, and the idea of taking up some of that green space, which is really pretty precious if you really evaluate it as far as square meters of area for people to enjoy when we take the road bed out. And then filling that up with a building of some sort may not really be the best solution. And, you know, everybody's going to have their opinion and their ideas. And the other thing I found out, just in, was on the campaign, is that people are really excited about this concept. I'm sorry to see that there's people who are negative, who are, probably really didn't sit through these 19 jillion hours of presentations and miss the details that made this thing come together. And then now are sort of coming in at the last moment, which I find really sort of unfair to show up with this kind of criticism, but yet I also agree that I think it's important to educate those people, that they see, what this is all about, what it all contains. But I find it a little upsetting to see this kind of thing here happening at the 11th hour, when this thing's been dragging on for 3 years, and there's been umpteen million meetings and chances and opportunities to get some understanding of the program. So I hope that, yes, we can fulfill that need to inform people so we can get everybody behind this. So I hope to see that happening, and I agree with what Tim said earlier. There's people that have invested a lot of time and money into this project and want to see Dublin hatch this program and come out with something that's pretty viable and exciting. And if you drag your feet long enough, there's going to be enough apartments built in other cities that are going to take up that need and may put the kibosh for this thing ever happening. So, either get with the program, figure it out, and either love it or like it, or, complain about it. So it's time to move on. And I agree that, yeah, maybe we need a little more education, but this thing's been a 3-year program, and I think it's been more than enough time.
Well, I just want to be clear. I was just seeking clarification based upon the comments that were made or the proposals. I support continued dialogue. Certainly questions are welcome. Rick, you make a good point. I think, my expectation is that the process will be applied. As Amy pointed out, we just recently amended it, to allow for more public input, engagement, if you will. So that's my expectation, and you make a good point. Developers should have that expectation, of course. So anyway, Marilee, time for us to get back to you.
Well, I'll just say that, of course, it's been great sitting next to you for many years and having you take each of us on at different nights and different years. The thing that I'm going to save a lot of my remarks till Thursday night, but the thing that I really will miss, and we all are going to miss this, is the historian that you are. And even when the staff can't find that piece of paper, you can. So this is a problem that we're all going to be having to say, quick dial, Kathy.
I was going to say, we may still have to call you.
Don't be throwing things out yet.
Staff will be excited.
Or will those boxes to somebody, But it's been really helpful to have the knowledge and history that you have brought to the conversations that many of us have either forgotten or didn't know to begin with. And thank you for your 20 years of service to this community and building it out to the magnificent community that's become.
Well, thank you. I always have to reply. It's remarkable what I do remember way long ago, because I can never remember what I ate for lunch. So it's just unbelievable. And I'm sure some staff members will be happy to know that the papers are gone.
Thanks. Amy?
I don't have anything. I don't plan to have a speaking role Thursday night, so I just want to say, Kathy, people are always saying, and particularly when we run for re-election, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to serve on city council? And I tell them two things, and I say, only in Dublin would I be interested in serving. And the reason is because one woman can make a tremendous difference, and I think none of us can find a better example of that than you, Kathy, and your 20-plus years of service, because it wasn't like you were sitting on your couch with your feet up before you got elected to council. You've been actively engaged, and we are going to miss that very much, and I know that your constituents are going to miss you very much, and so good luck to you in your quote-unquote retirement, but I'm hoping that you continue to make your presence felt, because you will definitely be missed, and I'm sorry to hear that all those papers are gone, but anyway, congratulations so much, Kathy. Thank you so much for all your service.
We've got a couple minutes before we're going to have to change the tape here. So I will try to go quickly. Of course, we'll all be there on Thursday. But Kathy, I just want to say, we go back at least 18 years, if I'm not mistaken. We served on the Planning and Zoning Commission together. when I was a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission and you were the council representative. You know, you were a good mentor, and, you know, I appreciate that. And, you know, the guidance that you provided, not only to the commission, but to me as a commissioner, and I appreciate that. You know, I think most people don't appreciate the sacrifice that a council member makes to serve. I think a lot of the public thinks that it's just these meetings, albeit till 10 o'clock at night or, you know, sometimes later, you know, but there's an awful lot more to it. You know, the sacrifice that you pointed out earlier, you know, your husband's support, you know, as you go to all these events and all these meetings and so forth. And, you know, we do it, you know, because we love doing it, and I know you've loved doing it, and I know, you know, really how difficult a decision it's been for you, you know, to, you know, decide to step down. You know, that's a difficult decision after all that you've invested and all that you've given. So thank you very much for your service these 20 years. I mean, it's just amazing. You know, and I'm sure the stories that you could tell and will tell, you know, over time, you know, I will certainly miss you, but hope you won't be far away. So we're going to adjourn just momentarily so we can change the tape for the grand finale. Thank you.